we live? We're going to figure it out shortly. It shows
Thanks.
live. There it goes. And we are live, episode 72 of the PHU Dynasty podcast. We are bringing you another doubleheader team review episode. Today, we're joined by esteemed colleague, Los Angeles Lambs general manager, James Sifu. Thank you for joining and helping us not talk about our own teams. We really appreciate you hopping on for this one.
Happy to be here. Yep.
Yes, sir. And then we have our championship trophy on display here, showing off the long gamers.
Yeah.
The joke has been Chris Herndon jersey so far today. Very I love the Nessie. Everybody loves the Nessie. And then in the spirit of my own team, and I did promise to wear some sort of costume last year, but unfortunately they're very expensive. But I will bust out the Texas Armadillos hat, which I don't even know if it'll fit right now, but I'll bust it out for this episode.
Oh yeah,
I gotta name him. I haven't named him yet, but I feel like he's the unofficial mascot of my team so far, and he's got a really cool tail too. So I'm really excited about this.
Speed bump.
Speed bump is a good one. Roadkill. Roadkill is a good one. See, it would have made a lot more sense, a couple of years ago, but maybe we'll talk about that with my team, maybe not being so much of a speed bump anymore. So, and we could be roadkill with injuries, but we'll talk about that in a minute. Any hoozles. So we have a lot to get to today. We have an Armadillos team review. We have a Long Gamers team review, which will leave us with just one final team review in the future episode, which is the Chile cheese fries, and we'll get to that. But we're going to start off with the Armadillos today, and to spare you me talking about my own team, I'm going to play a little bit of host/moderator here between the two panelists here to talk about my team. So we'll start off right at the top. Quick facts for the Armadillos. We finished 6th last year with a 7-7 record. We had the 6th most points and the 6th easiest points against. So kind of a funny stat there, just 6 across the board pretty much. But made a little bit of a run, made some noise in the playoffs last year, but unfortunately George Pickens was benched for Tyler Boyd, and that ruined our season. So thanks, James, for that trade. Really appreciate it. And then
subterfuge,
Yeah, it definitely didn't work out as planned. But that was a fun time because I literally sat on the toilet and looked at my sleeper app probably 4 times trying to decide who to start that week. And the last tinker stinker I did happened to just be putting in Boyd. So unfortunately it didn't work out for me. We also had a win-loss of 44 and 37 since 2018. So we have the 4th highest winning percentage. Even with that dump year a couple years ago, I think 2 wins is not ideal. So it's been a pretty respectable winning percentage.
For rebuilding.
And then transactions, we have the 3rd most moves since 2018 with 479. And then our 2 championship wins in 2016, 2020. And then James made a great point that apparently I win in election years. So maybe this is my year in 2024. Who knows? But anywho, those are the quick facts here. And we have a lot to get to on this podcast. So I'm going to start right out here on the quarterbacks. And I will open it up. So we'll start talking with Jalen Hurts. And frankly, we have our resident Philly fan here that can maybe give us some more insight. So Sean, how do you think Jalen Hurts stacks up this year? New offensive coordinator, new running back in the room with him. What are we thinking for Jalen Hurts?
I mean, it still wheels up for Jalen Hurts. He's still elite. I mean, I've got a clear tier of a top 2 quarterbacks, but he is like right after that for me. So, I mean, it's all going to really come down to like how much they continue to do the tush push or like what they do and don't do with that. Because I mean, he scored 15 rushing touchdowns last year, so that's
I don't think that's happening again, Sean.
That's a regression candidate if I ever see one. But on the other hand, like he should be in line for positive regression for passing yards, passing touchdowns on that side of it. So it should even out a little bit. And in our league, it doesn't really matter because you're going to get 6 points either way. So he's elite. I think it's like you start him and you don't think about it until bye week for him.
And James, with Hurts kind of also, Sean, correct me if I'm wrong, he had a bit of a nagging injury last year with his knee. Do you think that changes anything in terms of his, running usage this year? Not so much at the, goal line. Do you think that this is going to be more of vintage Hurts?
The more I think about it, there definitely are concerns, with not having the tush push potentially as strong without Kelsey, and then he did have some injuries last year. I remember on it, but as a thrower, he's always been pretty good. I don't, Brown and Smith are there. I do think the addition of Barkley will make the offense top 5 again. Like, there's no reason that they shouldn't be great. Kellen Moore is a pretty good coordinator. I don't think he's on the level of what like Shane Steichen got them on. I think they are going to take maybe half step back or whatever, but they should be in that top, all right. I mean, maybe not top 5, maybe closer to like the fringes of top 5, like top 10 area. But I just think Hurts is like, he's the whole engine of that offense. Even if he gets a little ding, like this dude's a warrior. He's always trying to play. I mean, he's been 2-3 the last 2 years, I think, in terms of his finish. So I understand that's buoyed a lot by the tush push, but it's a pretty safe bet, I think, to be a top guy.
And to add on to that, like I believe they were by like EPA, I think they were the 10th ranked offense last year, and that's with like everything absolutely going to shit and them running basically like high school offense last year.
Yeah, it got real weird at the end when I think.
I mean, that Bucs game was a disaster.
It was, and it's the classic Eagles where, like, I don't know, through our lifetime, it's just like the Eagles have had all these wild swings of like they're like the hottest team, and then but when they crash, this year the 1 year with Wentz when they were like not accused, like it was clear they're like, we're gonna like tank this game and just like let Washington win.
The narrative that seems to be going through like Philly is like Brian Johnson was not ready to be a coordinator last year, and then Sirianni was like, okay, well, let me just pull out old reliable like Shane Steichen's play calling from the year before.
Yeah,
but he's not the play caller that Steichen is, and like he's like trying to plug like a million different like holes in the boat, and then the defense couldn't tackle last year, and it was just a quicksand, like everything just kind of hit.
Yeah, I mean, but you could argue that kind of chaos was, good for Hurts, and even with, like the defense being kind of all over the place, like they play a lot of these high scoring games. I think
he plays a lot better when he's ahead.
Yeah, that's fair. I also think
he was awful against the blitz last year, and like he'll keep getting zero blitzed until he figures it out, and that's going to be probably maybe not so much like a big deal for fantasy, but like as far as like just him as like a quarterback in the NFL, like that's something that he needs to figure out if he's going to get better.
Do you think part of that though was because when he was against the blitz, he didn't have quite maybe the same burst of his knee injury, or do you think it was just kind of a little bit of everything?
It turned into him like just backpedaling and trying to throw off of his back foot and just hitting like a hot read just wasn't there. So it could be that. I think play calling, they were last in under center last year. They were last in play action, or one of the last teams in play action last year. I mean, they didn't really do anything to help themselves against the blitz. They were last in screen passes to running backs. Like they just didn't do anything to like overcome the issue that they're having.
Yeah, I mean, personally, I was listening to a couple of podcasts, and I can't really feel good about betting against the Eagles. I feel like this is a year where they might be a little bit down in terms of how they finished last year. Maybe the lines are a little lower, but I feel good about most of the Eagles this year. I'm not finding many reasons to knock them down on my list personally. But let's go to the next guy on the list. We got Brock Purdy, one of the many 49ers on this team. Purdy ends up, pretty good last year. Pretty damn good last year. With a finish of a QB6, 31 touchdowns, 11 picks, 4,200 yards, a couple rushing touchdowns. Obviously, he's definitely a big part of this offense and the clear-cut starter for the first time in his career. Even last year with, the supposed camp battle with Sam Darnold and Trey Lance end up not being much of a battle at all. How do we feel about Purdy this year? Do you think there's another chance for another top 6? Is this his ceiling? James, we'll start with you on that.
I mean, in terms of like ceiling, yeah, I think that's probably. I mean, it'd be surprising if he replicated the exact same numbers and all the success. I think he's good. I think he's showed some additional abilities late in the playoffs where he's like able to like, get on the move a little bit. And I think he's always shown that he is aggressive with throwing, but a big thing now is, we're going to get to him later with Ayuk, but if Ayuk's not there, what are we doing? Like, that's a big thing to replace. Cause like, I feel like Purdy needs that like vertical element, right? Like, it's great that he has McCaffrey, but you also have, who we'll talk about, to dump off to, and, with Debo with the easy stuff. But I think a lot of what made Purdy really good was having some of those deep intermediate throws and getting in rhythm with Ayuk. So if they traded him for Amari Cooper, which I said was like, I think that's like an interesting similar thing. I saw the Kendrick Bourne one possibly, because it's like the Niners want to get somebody in return for Purdy, which I think would be good.
Who played for the Niners?
Who?
Bourne. He was
Bourne?
Yeah, Bourne was on the Niners for a little bit.
Yeah, no, that's what I'm saying. So like that's like interesting. Obviously Cooper's a better player, but Bourne has the familiarity, so it's like almost similar-ish. I don't know, but I think Purdy probably, he would be better off just keeping Ayuk there. I think he's like fine as like a back end QB1. In the case of the Armadillos here, like it's a great thing to have, a guy who's going to be drafted as a either QB2 or 3, and then someone like Purdy who's more of a back end QB1.
Now, Sean, I think you've been on record saying that you think the Niners might have a down year this year overall. Do you think that hits Purdy this year, or is it kind of more the skill players?
I mean, that's just what history tells us. Like most teams that make it to the Super Bowl and lose, typically it's a down year after. That doesn't mean
they could still go like 9-8 and just be in high scoring games, and it's fine for fantasy though, right? Like
down year for the Niners is like 10 wins, like recently.
Yeah,
so
even 10.
When you say down year, like it's more like you were probably a little healthier the year before, and like that kind of stuff piles up, as we've already seen happen. Like for Purdy, like I think he's so efficient, but like the thing that will like boost him and like into like another tier is like they threw less than any other team last year. I think he only had like 500 attempts or around there.
He had 444.
444. So I think as a team they had like 500 because I think Darnold played a little bit, but that would probably be where like the floor would raise if like maybe they're in a little bit more like a negative game script, which they weren't. It's very similar to like the Eagles 2 years ago where like they were never losing to anybody. So that could be interesting because like we haven't really seen Purdy play like that. So curious to see, like that's kind of like it's one of the things I'm excited to see is him play where he's got to worry about like a rush a little more. Stuff that I think he can do it. He's definitely got the weapons to do it as of right now. We'll see.
Yeah, depending on what happens there, yeah.
I still think I think they're still, even without Ayuk, I think that's still a top 10 offense pretty easily. But I mean, you would like to have Ayuk for sure.
You definitely need Ayuk.
Absolutely.
I don't know. There were some games in the year though where they needed Purdy to do more of what you were saying, and he was throwing picks, right? Like I think that's when Debo was out. So he redeemed himself, I think, a little better in the playoffs. Purdy did, because it looked like they were done against the Lions, and Purdy did actually play pretty well down the stretch.
And on the flip side of that, I think McCaffrey missed a game last year. James, did he miss a game during the season? He didn't.
No, he just left. Like I said earlier, he just left. Whatever that was, week 17.
Maybe it was.
Well, then week 18.
It might have been the Debo and the Trent Williams game that he was at. Still threw for 300 yards in that game. So like he can definitely put up the yards, but like that comes with a little more risk.
Yeah. I also think it's just probably more realistic that he doesn't hit 30 touchdowns again, right? Like maybe he just hits 25 or 26, and like the picks are up, he's up to like 13 or 14 picks, which is still like, again, I think he's like a serviceable quarterback. I don't think he's this like, again, he was like he was the literal MVP favorite for like, an afternoon, and then Lamar came in and took it and whatever. So,
and last thing on Purdy is like, because like they were playing with such a lead, I don't think it's something that they needed him to do, but like he's pretty quick, and I think he can actually run a little bit.
Yeah.
He can do a little more. That could give him just a little bit of a boost.
Yeah, I mean, he only had 39 attempts for 144 yards last year, so obviously not asked to do a whole lot there, but I think there's something, like just from a escapability standpoint. Much better at running though. Caleb Williams, we'll get to him now. I feel like the expectations for him are extremely high coming in this year. From a fantasy perspective, it's a little bit hard to gauge, kind of what we're going to get. So, Sean, I'll start with you on this one. With a nice trio of wide receivers, a solid tight end, a running game that neither of us really love right now. Where do you think, Caleb Williams fits? We'll call it from a redraft perspective this year. Do you think he finds his way into the top 10, or do you think there's just not going to be quite enough to get him there?
I have him more as like a low end, like QB mid to low QB2 this year, just because I'm not so much like on the running, I think, as much as everybody else. I don't think he's going to do a ton of that unless he's around the goal line. I think that's where he did a lot of his damage in college, not necessarily like big runs or anything like that. But I mean, as a rookie, like he's just like he's so set up for success on this team. I mean, it's not really a situation that you've seen before. So I just gave him a little bit of a boost when it comes to like touchdown passes, yards. Like I think I've got him over 4,000 yards as a rookie, which is pretty crazy. And then 27 touchdown passes, which would be both records all time for the Bears as a rookie. So and it's tough to like predict that, but at the same time, like he's got 3 very good receivers he's gonna be throwing to. He's got a solid tight end. I don't love DeAndre Swift, but he is good with the ball in his hands once he has it like in open space. So he's probably gonna break a few plays. So like at a certain point, like you gotta like almost like look away from like the rookie tag and just be like, these guys are gonna make him better than maybe he actually is as a rookie. And that's kind of where I'm at with him.
James, do you feel the same way? I mean, I've kind of looked at the Bears at this point as a potential, if they reach their potential, to be a playoff team. It's will they get to that level?
I think there's been an interesting like good arms race in the NFC North of like those teams are all starting to draft and like develop better, and the Bears are set up as good as you can be with like a rookie quarterback. And I think we all agree Caleb is kind of that archetype of like that young Aaron Rodgers, maybe Mahomes, of like being able to, like run around and scramble, have kind of that gravity effect of like players want to play with him and there's clear production and all this stuff. The only thing I'm really worrying about is the offensive coordinator and kind of just like that Bears history and like, and frankly stuff unique to the Bears. It's like playing in Chicago with wind and the BS there. Like that's like a significant portion of your season, right? Like, there's a reason teams like take on the identity of their city and all this stuff because like that's kind of what it is. They're trying to get a new stadium, all this stuff. That's later down the road for the immediate future. This is what they have. I think Caleb, for fantasy for right now, like QB2, I think is like definitely what it is. I don't think drafting him as a QB1 is smart. I think there's too much talent right now in the league, and there's too many other reliable things to just say, oh yeah, Caleb's gonna be a QB1, but I think he's as the QB3 of this team, I think, and obviously as the number 1 pick and all the hype that comes with it, I think that's excellent. I think the most interesting thing about this QB room is like dynasty wise, do we think this is? I mean, I think this is the best asset of this team. Yeah, you think it's number 1 in the league? I think, the Bombers probably is another team that looks that you could throw their hat in the ring.
I think so too. They've stockpiled quite a bit of. So it's Jordan Love, Joe Burrow, Tua. I think there's one other one.
I mean, I would just say, Dan with Josh Allen. He's like he's old.
Dan had kind of a dominant quarterback room for quite a while.
And then Deshaun Watson has kind of fallen apart. Yeah, so maybe not. But
I've always viewed this. I mean, I was a little concerned, obviously, before the season with Sam Howell not keeping his job. So I definitely wanted a high upside 3, and just having the ball in my lap there. So that kind of worked out. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then who knows? Sam Howell might be back from the dead at some point. But
I feel like we're like very positive on Caleb. They're like, just so we throw out like the things that can go wrong. Like he holds onto the ball a lot.
Oh yeah.
He fumbles a lot.
Oh, 100%. Yeah.
He's the kind of quarterback that makes your offensive line look worse than it is. And I remember saying that when we were talking about like pre-draft stuff too. Like, so like he's gonna be great when he holds onto the ball. He's gonna be bad when he holds onto the ball, and that's just gonna lead to sacks and some fumbles and stuff. But like I think he's gonna make a lot more plays than like he makes poor decisions and bad plays.
I think his bad games are going to be really tough to watch. I think because
like any
they're going to have to go against good defenses this year. I think there's going to be a 3-pick game. I think there's going to be, one of those kind of just flops, and it's going to be a welcome to the league kind of moment for him at some point.
And you're with a defensive head coach that's been watching Justin Fields turn the ball over the last couple of years. Like, he's going to want to turtle up because he's got a defense.
Right.
Yeah.
That's something that you could see happen as well.
And he doesn't want to get fired. No, there's.
He's the favorite for coach of the year, betting favorite, which is
he really?
He is.
I would not. That's.
Can I bet against that?
That's just you might as well go light your money on fire. Like.
Yeah, I don't
like that.
Yeah, that.
Hard pass on that.
That's a stupid award anyway. The best coach never wins coach of the year.
Exactly.
Like, who won the most games?
No, it's who beat their spread.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
Yep. Who beats
Very
spread.
true. All right, let's go to the running back room here for the Armadillos.
Running back.
Obviously headlined by one Christian McCaffrey. We have former owner James Seafield here of Christian McCaffrey, and obviously today's news. Not really what you want to hear. A calf strain out all the preseason. Frankly, I'm happy that he's not playing in the preseason. I just didn't want it this way.
Right.
I was thinking that it might look a little different than this. So I'm obviously hoping for him to be fine for week 1. But James, let's talk about Christian McCaffrey as a whole, because obviously you're the one who traded him away. You saw the calf strain, towards the end of the season there. What was your kind of thought process on him as a talent going into this season?
I mean, it's still, he obviously when he plays, he's still the absolute best and is going to give you the volume and give you everything. I think it's just kind of the natural attrition of him getting older and the stuff of having these things. Like, I think it's reasonable to expect that, like maybe there are games that he misses or something just throughout the years. But I think when he plays, he's still obviously going to be an RB1. Calf strains are interesting because you never want them to linger. It is something that he had last year. And yeah, it was just part of I've rambled on in other pods about the reasons of why I did what I did. But one of the things of trading him early was it's like, you didn't want, would I be able to trade him at all with this news? Probably not. So like,
not until he's healthy, probably.
Yeah, exactly. Not until he's healthy again. And like you said, he's not going to play until the regular season again, which is fine. I would expect he's going to be healthy. They gave him the contract extension too, so like I'm not really that worried. It could just be a thing where it's like, oh, they have to just like say an injury, so he's just like out for the preseason. But it also it's definitely unsettling. Like anything
it doesn't feel good, James.
It doesn't feel good. Here, the one positive.
Armadillo man isn't very happy about it. I'll say that.
No.
Speed bumper, or whatever his name is.
But like I said, with CMC, even if he does miss games, like I think the games that when he plays, like you're going to get what you're paid for kind of stuff. Like the dude is going to still get you 15, 20 points and win weeks. And there's enough depth here, maybe not so much on the running back room here. We'll get to later, but I really like the other position groups on this team overall. But yeah, you do need McCaffrey.
McCaffrey is a big piece of this, obviously.
Yeah,
I really need him to be healthy for the playoffs. That's that's the biggest thing.
Because in order for this team to compete with, the top team that we'll talk about later, and their defending champion and Sean, and even the Lionheads who have an excellent running back room.
A significantly better room. Yeah.
Well, yeah. You're going to need McCaffrey to like kind of go blow for blow with some of these teams. And like I said, there are other things that the Armadillos have that are good, but McCaffrey is like, you're kind of, hey, like I'm in this like tier 2, but he needs to be there.
Yeah, I completely agree. And Sean, you've been also on record on the older running back train getting hurt. So this is kind of your chance to victory lap this already, I guess, perhaps. But how do you feel?
It's not like a major injury or anything. Like
calf strains suck ass, though. I'll tell you that.
Tissue injuries are terrifying in preseason because you don't know what's going to happen. And McCaffrey's the kind of guy that like tries to get on the field, so it's tough.
They're gonna hold him off the field.
Yeah, I feel like I've been like so like every time I talk about McCaffrey, I bring up like Bijan, like because we talk about them as like the top 2 where I have. But like, I mean, if McCaffrey plays all the games, like he's probably gonna finish number one. Like as much as I love Bijan, like it's more like a bet against like health, a guy with a lot of miles on his tires, and like statistically like not finishing one every single year. It usually doesn't happen.
Yeah.
But like you can't go wrong. Like he's the best player in fantasy football.
Yeah.
So like there's not really much to talk about like outside of the injury.
Right. He was number 2 the year before, I believe, right? Because
he was number 2 and then had another number 1 season in 2019.
I think the next 4 guys are a lot more interesting for me to talk about.
Yeah, and look, we can move forward here to one of the more polarizing players in redraft this year, in my opinion. I feel like his range of draft window could really be in a number of different spots depending on how you look at him. Is Devon Achane. Obviously had a couple of gigantic weeks last year. Clearly the giant Broncos game was, I did not start him, and it was the worst non-start of all time, but so did 95% of other teams that had him on the team at that point of the season. But Achane is explosive as hell. Clearly one of the most explosive players in the league at this point, in a very interesting offense this year. James, I'm pretty sure you've watched more Dolphins games than probably most folks living in South Florida.
Yeah.
How do you view this running back room? Is it going to be something similar to kind of what we got last year? Do you think it'll be more of a split, or how do you view Achane?
I think they'll start to feature Achane in more, than he was last year. But I still think Mostert gets some of the goal line work, which is always interesting. And I do think they want to use Jalen right, because I think their running game, like they just like to be multiple and do different things. But Achane is an amazing talent. There's no way he's going to keep up the 7 yards per carry or something ridiculous. Whatever it was,
it was absurd.
7. Yeah,
I started him out at 5.5 yards per carry, and I felt real weird.
It was 7.7.
7.7. Like it's not happening. It's not happening. It's great.
He only had 100 carries, so
yeah, it's not happening again. But this dude is amazing, and I think they'll use him in the passing game too. The Dolphins don't really have a wide receiver 3. They, I want Jonnu Smith to be a thing. I'm not sure he will be, so I don't know if they have a tight end either. But the Dolphins do have an interest and obviously the scheme to get multiple running backs involved, and I think that's what they're going to keep doing. I think Achane is kind of perfect as like an RB2. I wouldn't trust him as like my RB1 on a team, which is why the deal whatever made sense and all that. But I think Achane is probably a safe bet to finish around that RB 15-ish if he can play enough games.
Wow. So you and me both are below consensus, because he's like RB. I don't remember where he's at consensus, but he's like a fringe RB1.
Yeah, that's what like.
He's like.
I think players like generally that tier usually of like RB like 8 through 15. It's we're splitting hairs on a lot of them, so I could see him being that high. Would I want to take him that high?
He's RB8 currently for Fantasy Pros. So
yes,
that's
a lot of best ball though.
There's a few backs that I'm looking at that I would take over him. So like for me,
another ADP.
For me, he's closer to RB 15. So like maybe I'm just lower on him than I
do this.
Yeah.
This is RB 13 for Fantasy Football Calculator. So that's kind of more in line with what you guys are saying there. He did finish as RB 11, or no, not 11, sorry, 21 last year, despite only having 100 carries, which is crazy, and played in 11 total games. But yeah, obviously the 7.7 yards per carry is not happening again, especially if he gets more carries. I mean, to me, I've always kind of viewed him as if he can reach his full potential, as like a Chris Johnson, perhaps, that type of player, maybe not the same type of production, but just a slight build, extremely fast, and obviously a big piece in the receiving game. But for the Dolphins, just the amount of speed they have on this team is completely insane. I mean, just to have Waddle, Achane, Hill. I mean, frankly, I think we're going to get more Waddle in the running game this year as well. I think with Beckham probably going to be the outside X guy, I could see a lot more Waddle being used on like jet sweeps and whatnot. So I just feel like there's going to be like boom bust weeks for all these guys, just depending on game plan. And it's
exactly what I like on my notes. I just have him listed as a boom bust RB2.
Yeah, I mean, there's going to be weeks where it's like, holy shit, I'm glad I started him, and then there's going to be weeks that I feel like he's just gonna bust out for 40
And
yards or whatever.
just super obvious regression coming for their entire running back room, just for like touchdown totals and everything from last year, because that was a lot of rushing touchdowns last year.
I mean, Achane had 8 and had 5 in the one game, so it's like,
yeah, so
or a couple of receiving, I guess, but
hard to try and predict that again. So
all right, next guy on the list, Jalen Warren, getting a new offensive coordinator, a very polarizing one with Arthur Smith. Also working with I can't believe I didn't have this loaded up already, but I'll put it in right.
Harris.
Getting a little Najee Harris battle in there as well. Last year had a pretty good season overall, for a number 2 running back. I thought he was a really good player overall, for my team, because I did not have a lot of running back talent last year. Finished as RB 30, 784 rushing yards, 4 touchdowns, 370 receiving yards. He averaged 5.26 yards per carry going into his 3rd season. So, Sean, how do you view this running back room? I know we talked about Najee Harris a little bit on Alex's podcast, but what do you think of the range of outcomes for a guy like Warren, who's being drafted significantly later in redrafts around RB 29, 30-ish area?
Contingent upside, like he could be an RB1. Like if he gets the backfield to himself, if Harris gets hurt, like I have no doubt in my mind he could be a top 10 RB.
Shrek has other words to say.
RB1.
I said an RB1, like a top 10.
Yes, he said RB1. He said RB1.
I don't really consider that spicy. Like I have him at RB20 to start.
Is this the hot takes episode? Did I answer new reality? Okay.
No, I've got him and Najee as 20 and 21 back to back in my rankings. I think they got better.
I just don't think any Steelers player can beat even if the other one got hurt, I don't think they're an RB1. That's just like the Steelers' offensive output. And because Arthur Smith he makes it a point to feature the second running back, which is good for Jalen Warren.
They'll bring back Anthony McFarland somehow, and then he'll be the guy.
So this team got better at OC. He's a much better OC than Canada.
Canada was ass, James. Come on. He was terrible.
Don't be stupid.
And that being said, Arthur Smith, it's not good. It's not good. But he was good for Tennessee.
No, Arthur Smith's a good OC.
All right.
Let's calm down.
What's your better reason?
He's a good OC.
Okay. Next.
All right. They got better at quarterback because Kenny Pickett.
Okay, yeah, probably.
Anything is a step up from that. Their offensive line got better.
That's true. That is true.
All those three things.
I mean, that's not arguable.
Did they draft somebody? No. Who did they bring in on the line?
Fautanu, and then they drafted a guard as well. They drafted Frazier out of West Virginia,
who's awesome.
Who's really good.
I think they got significantly better.
They have a rookie tackle. They have Broderick Jones, who's now in the second year, who was really good down there. Who is a motherfucker in the run game.
He's gigantic.
And they have.
It's a big line.
Yeah, they have the biggest tight end in the world too.
They finished strong last year, as the Steelers do.
But I like this team. I don't think they're going to be a top 10 offense. I don't want you to hear what I'm not saying. They're going to be probably one of the few, like probably one of the 5 or 6 best run games in the NFL. I feel pretty good about that with Arthur Smith. And I just think they're going to be much better. Like I wouldn't hesitate. Like if somebody picked them to win the AFC North, I wouldn't hesitate in a second.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm just kind of over getting hyped on the Steelers. It's the same BS like every year with them. I think the others, like you said, them being higher up in the rushing rankings for fantasy specifically, I think that's probably the most interesting thing, because that just, this is a volume game. That's what we're interested in. So I think that's good. But the bottom falls out on this team like on random weeks all the time. Like there's just like not an offense I'm excited to like start players in. At any point, it could be like, oh, look at that. The Steelers are losing 7-3 deep in the third quarter in a game you expected them to have 27 points, right? Like they are the most frustrating team. And Jalen Warren, he was ranked 30th last year. I think I saw again on Sleeper, the current rankings on Sleeper 31. Not that, like in ADP.
He's 29 for ADP and right now for one of the ones I'm looking at here. So.
Okay. 29, 31, that's closer where I have him. Again, in non PPR, I think somebody like him is more. Just yeah, I just don't. I'm not gonna have him as high up as Would you say 22, Sean? You have him. I can't go there. I don't think there's enough. 20. Yeah, I don't think there's enough. There's not. I don't foresee that much offensive output from the Steelers to support two backs in that range.
Yeah, and for my team, I'm looking at him as a flex option, week to week flex option based on what's happening. So it probably works for that spot. But last year I was relying on him pretty much every week as RP2, so it's not ideal, to start him in that role. But now that we've added some talent here, seems to fit better. And another guy that carried the shit out of me last year, Gus Edwards here. He's also ranked in a similar position on most redraft boards. He's right now on this fantasy football calculator at 27. So a little bit ahead of Jalen Warren. We've talked a little bit about this backfield being kind of up and down, depending on, nobody really knows what this is truly going to look like at this point for the Chargers, but I feel like Gus Edwards probably has the inside edge to be that guy early in the year. James, how do you view this backfield working out? I know you watch a lot of Chargers football with Justin Herbert on your team. So.
Yeah, I think Gus is. It's going to be fairly simple, I think, to figure out this year. It's like if he's healthy and playing, I think he's probably going to be the lead back unless somebody maybe takes it from him. Like maybe Kamani Vidal, maybe Dobbins if has anything left. But I think it'll be pretty clear. As the game's going, but Gus is going to have a role. Like Jim Harbaugh wants to run the ball. Gregor Roman's the OC. Like we know what this is. Like when they're inside the 5-yard line, Gus is getting the football, right? Like that's especially Justin Herbert now has plantar fasciitis. Like we're not, screwing around with him. So I think Gus is interesting there.
It's a tier 2 to plantar fascia. It's not plantar fasciitis. Just so
we're clear. Okay.
I didn't go to podiatry school, unfortunately.
Yeah. Either way, a lot of things. Yeah, we're it's fine. Justin Herbert. Just take the year off. It's fine. Don't worry about it.
He's got Baker Mayfield on that.
Yeah, it's fine. We have a real QB1 anyway. But Gus Edwards.
Hot take episode.
Let's relitigate that. Jesus Christ.
Gus, like I said, I think it's going to be obvious. It's getting a little concerning though that he had some injuries and was not practicing, but I think he's a vet, so I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt until we get like 2 weeks out and I still hear he's not practicing. Like again, most of the McCaffrey stuff is in jest, and Sean said earlier, like as long as he's healthy, he's there. Whatever, we know what it is. I think Gus in a much different way, but I'll give him the idea as a vet. If he's playing, I think he's going to be a plug and play kind of guy in your flex. The Chargers are going to run the ball.
Yeah. I mean, for me, it's that backfield's going to be 50-50, him and Dobbins if they're both playing. And he'll get the goal line and Dobbins will get the passing down work, and that's how it'll be split up. But when they inevitably get injured, because they get injured every year, it'll be a little tougher to figure it out.
And then you get a little more Kamani and Vidal thrown in there, perhaps.
It's been Jared Patterson.
Hey, Jared Patterson. I'm obviously fan of the podcast. We all love Jared Patterson here. I wish it worked out in Washington for the kid, but man, he was a fun player to watch for a while, but he never got anything going. But maybe he's got something there, Sean. So yeah, Gus Edwards, ADP right now in redraft 10-team format, round 7, pick 6. So kind of in the heart of the draft there. Seems kind of right to me. Next guy on the list, Jonathan Brooks. Obviously, starting the training camp on the pup, recovering from that ACL injury last year towards the end of this football season for college. Doesn't seem likely that he's going to be ready for the start of the season, let alone the first couple weeks of the season. So, James, with Jonathan Brooks kind of seeming like he'll be the guy when he does come back, how do you view him this season? And how do you view the Panthers running game as a whole at this point?
Panthers running game.
Because it's not usually ideal since
I think
McCaffrey left. But
I think they're going to kind of schlub their way through the beginning of the season with Chuba Hubbard and whatever is left of Miles Sanders. I think I think for the Armadillos and obviously the Panthers, the best case scenario is that Brooks kind of hits his stride later in the year, and I think for you want him to like replace a guy like a Jalen Warren who's a little more like, is he going to actually get the carries, this and that. Like I think by late in the year, Brooks, the Panthers, I think are going to be more respectable this year, maybe more in the 5-ish to 6 wins. Where like late in the year, like, hey, we're still hyped because we're, trying to win games, and John the Brooks has a couple big games late in the year, I think is very much on the board. But it's going to be slow since they've already said week 3 or 4. So that means like week 7, 8 is the time he'll actually start getting meaningful carries.
Yeah, playoff push time frame for fantasy. Sean, how do you view Brooks? Obviously knowing that he'll probably be out at least 3 or 4 weeks.
Yeah, I mean, I got him at RB 31 right now, just as like a redraft ranking. But like, I mean, he's probably going to be slow to start, and I think where he's going to make his money is going to be towards the end of the year, like you're saying. I'm not seeing like I don't see a lot of like touchdowns upside for them, but he's pretty game script proof as a running back just because he's so good out of the backfield catching the ball. So like that's nice. He's going to be on the field towards the end of the year. They're gonna probably start to ride him pretty hard. So, I mean, quality flex, I think, by the end of the year.
Yeah, the Panthers have an absolutely brutal stretch after their bye week. They go Kansas City, Tampa, Philly, Dallas, 4 straight. So those are all pretty quality run defenses there. I'm feeling like that's not ideal probably, but at this point we're kind of viewing this season as a half redshirt year pretty much for Brooks. But luckily with McCaffrey coming, well, hopefully if he plays, we have a little bit more depth here that seems okay. We got a couple other running backs to talk about here towards the bottom of the list, kind of some younger guys. Braylon Allen, part of the trade with Kendre Miller and Adonai Mitchell from early in the year. It seems like he's got the inside edge for the RB2 job with the New York Jets. I think their first depth chart came out like yesterday or today, and he was listed as number 2, which doesn't seem like much of a surprise because he's gotten some pretty good, buzz throughout camp and the OTAs and whatnot. So do we feel like he has any, potential to be, a playable asset this year, or is it the Breece Hall show? We could start with Sean here.
I mean, it's the Breece show, but like I feel like the Jets use their second running backs just enough to like piss off a Breece Hall owner this year. And Braylon Allen's, I mean, he looks pretty good. So like if he earns some carries, if he earns like a couple goal line carries, like it wouldn't surprise me. But I mean, he's a pretty quality handcuff at this point.
James, any other thoughts on Allen there?
It's a stab in the heart to the Izzy Abanikanda truthers, is what it is.
Oh, we all loved Izzy. James, at this point, are you going to hold on to him and hope he gets cut and signed by the Dallas Cowboys or something?
He's going to get carries on another team this year.
Yeah, that sounds great. Yeah, I mean, at this point, I just want to see preseason, see who gets carries and who gets hurt and all that. But for Braylon Allen, yeah, I don't think there's any value beyond Breece Hall getting hurt. I don't think a 20-year-old, 21-year-old, or 20-year-old back. But it's the Jets, so who knows?
Yeah, anything could happen with the Jets.
I just think I think he's a good dynasty player, but in terms of immediate impact, I don't think I think it's more likely that Estime or even Dylan Lobb, who I didn't know about before, 2 months ago. Like I think it's more likely they make impact as rookies, like on standalone roles. I think Breece Hall is that good, and the Jets. And if Breece Hall gets hurt, like I don't want any part of the Jets to begin with. So, yeah,
it's going to be a tough sled without Breece Hall if he goes down. And you did mention Estime there real quick. I mean, Estime kind of profiles as that bigger body goal line type back. Obviously, with Javonte Williams there and reportedly playing pretty well in training camp so far. Obviously, news to the ears here of
motivation tactics.
Yeah, motivation tactics perhaps, but Estime kind of profiles as that bigger Chris Ivory type back that we've mentioned before on this podcast. So, I mean, do you guys think that there's flex appeal here potentially at some point during the season, or is this kind of just like a long-term play as well?
I view him as a handcuff. I think McLaughlin has more of a flex appeal than he does.
I think the Ivory thing is interesting, and that's the role. The problem is the Broncos are bad, so
They're very bad.
this isn't one of his Saints teams that are just gonna like randomly, he's gonna like, get his, string and freaking like metal pole out and beat someone with a gun or something like Sean Payton. Like he's like not gonna just win with this team. Like he doesn't have an established culture and offense like he did with the Saints. So I think it's more of a slow burn, but Estime eventually will probably be pretty good.
Have you listened to any of his press conferences, Peyton, in Denver?
I don't like listening to Sean Payton. So
that's the point. Like he just sounds like he's dead on the inside. It's hilarious.
It's a lot like Dennis Allen, to be honest with you, because Dennis Allen sounds like he hates every one of his players all the time.
Well, Dennis Allen knows.
He just hates Kendra Miller and ATP.
Oh, he loves shitting on those guys. Oh my god, he loves it. But he loves talking about Mason Tipton though. He loves Mason Tipton. Big fan. Yeah, it's funny how every time I see a clip about A.T. Perry, it's just him getting dogged every time. It's like, dude, this guy like has zero shot to play based on what you're saying. So he's funny, a funny listen for sure. But last guy, we'll just because you mentioned McLaughlin too a little bit, but we'll go to Dylan Lawbay at the bottom here. One of the prototype 24-year-old rookie running backs from New Hampshire of all places.
Yeah,
it seems like he's getting some buzz, in the early parts of camp here, and it seems like he might profile as kind of like a usable third down back at times. So I don't want to spend too much time on him here, but I viewed him as kind of an option potentially depending on roster cuts and whatnot. So. We'll just have to see how that goes, but we'll go right to the wide receiver page. You got a lot of names here, so we'll try to pick and choose here. Yeah, compared to the Alex Morales episode with only 5 to talk about, we have quite a number of bodies here. So obviously, the elephant in the room here, Brandon Ayuk, with basically just every time I go to Twitter, I'm like, has he been traded yet? Where is he going? How much is it going to hurt?
There are so many asshats on this list. Like I hate to.
We have a lot of divas here. We have a lot of divas.
Holy,
like 5 at minimum to me.
I mean, oh my science.
A lot of asshats.
And you drafted Keon Coleman and traded him.
I did, as a matter of fact.
Yeah.
But he was like, I viewed him as like just a good character. I just love watching him say things. Like he was so fun to watch in the press conferences. But these other guys are just jagaloons. I mean, Ayuk, James and I were talking just before this podcast came out. If Brandon Ayuk was a check in the bank player, I would not be overly surprised. He just kind of comes off as, I had my big 1 year, and maybe this is my one shot to, or as he mentioned in his Instagram page, I'm too hungry to spit up my food like that. So, I mean, he seems like one of those kind of guys that might be, really hunting for that check right now, and hopefully not putting it in the bank and not running the Kenny Golladay route. But
it took Shanahan like 2 years to get him to start blocking, didn't it? And now he's like one of the best blocking wide receivers.
He was in the doghouse, Sean. You remember the year that he was in the doghouse and didn't do anything, and then all of a sudden now he thinks he's this, elite top 5 wide receiver money kind of guy. It's very strange. Anywho, from a trade perspective, it seems like the finalists are all teams that I do not want him to go to. So it's the Steelers, the Patriots, and then I guess the other option was the Browns, which feels like the best of the 3 options right now, which is strange. I just don't know what's happening. I would love for him just to stay. It doesn't feel like that's happening as of right now, but I do feel like the 49ers front office is definitely calling his bluff right now, and I'm kind of okay with that. So,
they don't really have a choice.
Yeah,
so like guys they have to pay.
They have a lot of guys to pay.
Purdy
and
next year.
Yeah, Purdy's a huge one next year, obviously, but
he's going to get 55 plus.
Do we? We'll preface this. Do we think he's getting traded?
Yes. I don't think he is. I think he's going to end up staying.
I think
interesting. So we're.
I think they're going to, because I don't think a team is going to be willing to give up, and I think Ayuk's going to realize that no team is going to. Like I don't think there's sufficient reason for the Browns or Patriots to be desperate. I think the Browns are like opportunistic, and so the Amari Cooper thing would make sense for them. Oh yeah, hey, like let's trade a good receiver for like a good receiver who's younger. Like that makes sense. Like I would do that in Dynasty, Eric, and like you wouldn't, you know?
Right.
So like
I think the Browns are dumb enough to do it.
I think the Browns, their owner is an idiot with the Watson thing, but I think everything else, I think they're pretty smart. I don't think he's meddling in Brandon Ayuk. He doesn't probably know who Brandon Ayuk is. Let's be real. Come on.
Well, the interesting thing too is like not
he
only do
seems
they
like
have
a low
to.
character guy, I wouldn't want to get involved with a low character guy and trade.
Well,
I know that's not what you meant. I was just
a quarterback is the owner likes to swing the dick around and make the big decision.
I mean, here's what I want to say real quick. for Brandon Ayuk, somebody's gonna have to trade for him first, which is going to cost something, and then sign him for apparently top 5 wide receiver money. So like that kind of gets me leaning towards the fact that he might actually stay. But I mean, there's so much smoke right now; it's very hard to kind of figure out what's going to happen. And I'm just sitting there just waiting. I'm like, can this just be over already? So I can figure out what the hell I need to do. Cause like,
it's a damn soap opera. Like all your receivers, there's
a lot of soap operas, James.
They just love the spotlight. That's it. Like they're all just wrestlers. Like
Nico's doing his own thing. He's fine.
I was going to say, Nico is the one guy who just,
that's the team. Yeah. Nico and the asshats.
Hey,
the Niners.
You keep Roma Dunze out of your mouth too. Roma Dunze is a quality human being.
Those are going to have to carry the locker room.
It's two.
But he's a rookie, so like he's kind of like in like the next wave of like thing. But I'm talking Ayuk, Pickens, Rice, Addison, Williams. Those are 5 clear as James Williams. Clear as day. Jagaloon asshats.
Imagine if I traded back for Tyreek Hill. He could lead the asshats.
Yeah,
anything could happen.
He's an original.
We can facilitate that. Let's do it live on the podcast.
Live.
Trade discussions live on the podcast. Brandon Ayuk for Tyreek Hill straight up.
No.
All right, well, I tried. Anywho, let's go on to Nico Collins here. Obviously we don't really know what's going on with Ayuk right now, so that's kind of a hard one to talk about. I mean, if he stays,
real quick, I was gonna say mid wide receiver 2 right now for me if he's on the Niners, and probably bump him down a few spots if he gets traded, just because.
I think if he goes anywhere else, he's got to go down.
Yeah, new team, new offense, short time period to learn the playbook and all that. I think it's gonna be tough. So, yeah, all right. Nico Collins.
Yeah, so Nico Collins a little bit more, set in stone. He got his 3-year extension. Didn't bitch at all. Seems to be out of the limelight, unlike some of the other guys here. Obviously, Nico Collins a little bit slower of a burn to get going, but finished really solid last year. Had a fantastic season in his 3rd-year breakout. Finished with 1,297 yards and 8 touchdowns for wide receiver 9. Obviously getting some additional, target share competition with, Stephon Diggs coming in. And then, of course, Tank Dell being healthy and looking good, it seems like so far. So I think, he's going to have a little bit more competition in the passing game. But, obviously historic numbers last year for CJ Stroud. Do we think that the numbers will stay, kind of in that same range for Collins this year? Or is there going to be a little bit of a regression perhaps in both yards and touchdowns? Do we think wide receiver 9 is in play again? We can go to James on this one.
Yep.
Yeah, I really think it is. I'm a big fan of Nico. I'm not a fan of the tier of wide receivers probably right after AJ Brown. Like I'm talking
let me see if I can look at them real quick here.
Talking like in a redraft sense. Like there's to me there's like a clear 6 elite ones, and then
then it goes to like Cooper Kupp
and Puka. We're in
Metcalf,
Puka
Olave, Puka.
Yeah, I think Nico Collins is in that tier, and I think he's just as likely as anyone to come out ahead in that tier. I think he has a clear connection and role in the Texans offense. I think Diggs is interesting. In a perfect world, Diggs just kind of enhances their offense, right? Where he kind of just, gets to know Brown to be just like a clear, hey, friend, you're just special teams and the backup. So I think Nico Collins, there's no reason why he can't be wide receiver 9 again. I think the Texans, it's all systems go. I think where the arrows are pointing up. Nico Collins had the pedigree of, big receiver, Michigan, think had a good 40 time. There's a lot of natural progression, 3rd-year hit, a lot of things to like.
Yeah, and with Nico too, I mean, I still think there's more, talent wise that he can
Yep.
offer too. I mean,
Yep.
obviously it was kind of his first big year last year. I think there's still something left to untap. And then of course, he got that big extension, but it was also a pretty shrewd extension, in my opinion, by the Texans, where they can get ahead of the
Yes.
fourth year and not have to deal with the Brandon Ayuk situation and potentially get him a little cheaper. I think it was a 3-year. I can't remember the numbers off the top of my head, but it was a pretty decent contract overall for the team. And of course, CJ Stroud has a ways to go before he has to get paid. So it seemed like a pretty good move. Now, Sean, he's getting drafted at the 210 3-1 turn in redraft for 10-team leagues. Do you kind of echo what James is saying, kind of in that tier of players?
Yeah, I mean, I might just be a little lighter on him just with the target competition. Like, he was so incredibly efficient last year, and it's pretty tough. Even in like that Shanahan type, like McVay kind of offense where efficiency is usually above the rest of the league, like he was like on another level of efficiency last year. So you kind of have to like expect like a little bit of bump back. I don't expect much. Like, he was wide receiver 9 last year. I think I have him at wide receiver 12. So like we're talking minimal stuff. Like, he's still great. Like, he's the best. I think he's the best receiver on that team. I think he's
I agree with that.
lead at this point. So
yeah. I mean, I think at this point in Diggs's career, and I don't think Dell overall is as good of a player. So I think that's pretty fair to say. All right, so we're about 55 minutes in already, so we'll try to speed up a little bit on each player here. So we're into the quartet, I guess, of Jagaloon receivers here. So we'll start off with the top one, George Pickens. The talent is there. I think a lot of people obviously know that he can, is capable of making these insane catches down the field. Seemed to develop some more of his game last year. His first year, he was pretty much just to go down and catch the ball, on the sideline kind of player. This year, this past year, he played a little bit more over the middle, so kind of showed a little bit more of his upside. This year, he's, as of right now, the clear-cut number 1 on this team. Arthur Smith offense. Last year, he finished, I believe, let me pull him up real quick, unless somebody else got it faster. It's wide receiver 23, 1,140 yards and 5 touchdowns. A lot of boom and bust weeks too. Only had 63 catches. I've noticed that his ADP is kind of in that same range as what he finished last year. He's at ADP 22, wide receiver 22 right now. Finished at 19 or 23 last year. I'm sorry. So kind of right where he finished last year. Do we see anything higher, lower, or is it kind of just right in that 23 window, Sean?
I am a little bit higher. Like I said, I like all the Steelers at ADP. We could rehash the same thing we talked about with the running backs.
Yeah, we don't have to do
that. We don't have to do that again. But I like him above consensus. Like, he was much better in the games when Deontay Johnson didn't play last year. He was elite when he wasn't there. New offense though, so it's tough. We'll see. But like, both quarterbacks coming in, regardless of which one plays, are much better at getting the ball down the field, like deep down the field, than Kenny Pickett was. So I would imagine that's going to help him as well.
Yeah, James, how do you feel about Pickens this year overall? I know you said that you're not a huge Steeler guy, but
yeah, I think he's a good candidate for wide receiver 3 flex duties throughout the year for your team. I think relying anything more than that is not wise. On the flip side, though, Russ Wilson will feed a receiver of his type. So if he's actually playing well, I think it could work and be better than I think. But I think he's closer to like wide receiver 3 territory.
Yeah, and kind of just I'm a little bit maybe lower on consensus this year too, just because the Arthur Smith. I mean, when it gets to the red zone, he's more of a runner. I just don't think that they're going to be using him on as many fade balls. I mean, clearly they didn't do it with Kyle Pitts. They hardly did it with Drake London. I just don't see a ton of that based on pass usage, but he's a different kind of talent in the red zone. So maybe he gets more red zone touches than I'm thinking. He only had 5 touchdowns last year and 4 the year before. So, I see Sean smirking. So I feel like he's not feeling our Arthur Smith discussion.
I know Arthur Smith hates fantasy football, but like, I feel like he's getting a little bit harsher treatment than he probably deserves. That's all.
All right. Next on the list, another Jagaloon, Rashee Rice. Obviously having a rough go of things this offseason, cannot stay out of trouble. I'm just every time he does something, I'm just like, why are we doing this? Can we just stay home? He just can't stay home. So the problem is, we don't know what kind of suspension he's up against right now. Obviously with Addison, it seemed to come out yesterday or the day before that he's going to miss 3 games. It looks like from a suspension standpoint. We don't know what we're getting with Rice yet. However, it seems like he's playing very well at camp from what I can tell online, Twitter reports and whatnot. There's more target competition here now. Sean, you've been on record thinking that the Chiefs offense will be significantly better than they were last season. Where does that leave Rice then, I guess, assuming that he's going to miss at least a couple of games, right?
Dude, he's tough, man. Like, it's so hard to predict like what's going to happen with him. At this point, I just have it as like it's going to get pushed off into next season because like we're getting pretty close at this point.
Yeah, frankly, I'm not entirely sure.
I think I saw his date is like
works, but
after the year. Yeah, I've read some saying the same things that.
And that doesn't mean it's going to actually be. It could get pushed again. You never know. The legal system.
What happened with the Kamara situation? Because I feel like it's kind of similar to that.
Yeah, he beat the shit out of a guy in Las Vegas, and nothing happened for like 2 years.
Yeah, I mean, like it's. I guess as long as the court system is ridiculous, then he might not have anything this year. But I mean, the thing is, we just don't know.
There was a lot of people affected, so it's not like it's just like a one person kind of thing. I don't know. I think that probably complicates it, but I'll let Justin explain that one.
Yeah, seriously, VP of Legal Services, if you're in the comment section, now's your shot.
But yeah, as far as him playing this year, like he has a lot more competitions for target in this offense this year. For me, like assuming a healthy Hollywood Brown and Xavier Worthy, I think that doesn't like he'll still out target what he did last year, but I don't think it's gonna be like a ton. So I like him as like a mid or wide receiver 3 this year.
James, how do you feel this year?
I mean, if he's on the field, I'm higher on Rice. I think he can. I mean, I think frankly he has some of the highest upside on your team among your receivers. I think Rice he profiles more as the volume receiver, and I think they are looking for ways to scale back Travis Kelce's workload during the year, and I think Rice is part of that. He's good over the middle. He just needs to not be an idiot and race his car, and if you do, just don't make it worse.
I mean, he finished the year strong last year.
I think he's an excellent player. So I think he's I like him more than Pickens on your team. And with this Ayuk stuff getting weird, he may be your wide receiver 2 in the way I view things.
Yeah, I mean he's a pretty limited route runner last year. So like as far as just like on ball stuff, I'm sure he'll have more in his bag this year. I think that's kind of like, you gain a year in the NFL, you get a little bit better.
Sure.
But it's definitely something I'd want to see before I'd be like elite. But he was like, I want to say like the last like 6 games last year, he was a wide receiver 1.
He was a huge reason that I made the playoffs, let alone getting, past the first round too. So,
but nobody was challenging him for targets on that team.
Not even a soul. I mean, it was embarrassing really towards the end of the year. And really Rice made a lot of his money on those mesh concepts, kind of just, running the drag across the field and making a couple of guys miss. And it's funny because that's just not what even I saw of him at SMU. It just was not even the same player. So I guess Andy Reid had significantly different ideas and they seemed to work out very well. So I'm not going to question Andy Reid's, progression with a good rookie receiver too. So I think I'm higher on him than probably consensus, obviously, but I'm like James said, if he isn't suspended this year, like wide receiver 2 is definitely in the range of outcomes. We can move on to Jordan Addison, another fellow Need for Speed game enthusiast apparently, and the real life enthusiast. So he got suspended for 3, or it looks like it'll likely be a 3-game suspension. Obviously his quarterback play this year is not going to be ideal with Sam Darnold and JJ McCarthy. It wasn't very ideal last year after Kirk Cousins went down anyway. But they didn't really change a whole lot in this offense from a receiver standpoint. So, James, how do you view Addison, assuming a 3-game suspension this year?
I mean, it's just not a good sign.
No.
Is suspension gonna be like in the middle of the year or to start the year? Like, I don't know.
I mean, I got to look at his player card again. I
Yeah.
haven't seen anything.
For
but-
them, it'd probably be better if it was the middle of the year because they don't have
So
hockey.
we'll have
until-
October 7th arraignment.
So it's just like, you'll be suspended during your trial, so you can go to your trial. Whatever the case, he'll be suspended, miss some games. The issue is, I like Minnesota's offense. You know, like I'm notoriously high on Kevin O'Connell and what they've done there, but he's clearly behind Jefferson now, and they have Sam Darnold experiment or JJ McCarthy as a rookie. So this is a tough one for me this year, Jordan Addison.
Last year he finished with 911 yards, 10 touchdowns, 108 targets, 70 catches, finished as wide receiver 19.
He was a big reason for some of your wins early because
he really was.
hurt. So I don't know if you're going to get that same production this year.
Yeah,
I wouldn't be surprised.
Even before the suspension, I had him outside of my top 50 wide receivers. Like I just think the regression.
That seems aggressive, but okay.
The regression's gonna be bad because he did a lot of his damage with Kirk Cousins, and
he also had 10 touchdowns.
He had 10 touchdowns. He did the Cortland Sutton last year, where he didn't really do much outside of the touchdowns that he scored. And
I mean, 900 yards is not nothing, but
910 as a rookie is pretty impressive. But at the same time, you know, I feel like there's a lot of detractors this year. As last year, everything was kind of just like upside and like, oh, this is great. We're just keep, you know, like that he exceeded expectations all year long. So like this year, it feels like there's a lot less to be excited about. So I could see Sean, I could see why you're lower on him. All right, let's go to the next guy on the list here. So far, so good as far as being a Jagaloon. Roma Dunze seems to be, fitting in nicely with the Chicago Bears offense. He's a tough one to project this year. I know we've talked about him on other podcasts, so we'll keep it short. But with Keenan Allen there, DJ Moore there, where do we see him slotting in this year in terms of wide receiver value? Sean, we'll start with you on this one.
I think he's a low end flex with upside if Keenan Allen gets hurt. I'm pretty sure I have him projected to lead the team in touchdowns, receiving touchdowns. I just like that for his profile this year. But like I was easily the highest of anybody I knew about Odunze coming out of the draft, though. So I'm probably a little more high on him than other people.
I'm trying to find him on this ADP list right now.
That's interesting. I think he's going to be someone that's going to be useful and that you can start. I'm very excited about him long term. I think him and DJ Moore are like a nice duo. Like they do some different things. I think it'll work really well. This year could be more of later in the year. You may need a Keenan Allen injury or something to have some consistent production, but I think Odunze will be pretty solid.
Yeah, right now they have him as 83 overall, wide receiver 39. So it kind of goes in line with what Sean was mentioning here.
I'm 7, so it's not. Not a big
pretty close there. I mean, I'm viewing him as potentially a late season surge kind of guy, and maybe he ends up being more of a red zone threat like Sean mentioned, whereas the other two guys might not have quite that same level of upside around the goal line. So I just don't think they're going to be a very good goal line running team this year either. So I feel like they'll have some chance to score some touchdowns. We can kind of group in Javon Baker and Jalen Polk here together as the Patriot receivers. Obviously, they bring in both of these guys at different points in the draft this year. It seems like Jacoby Brissett is going to be the starter. I'm calling him Jacoby Brissett just because I just love him. And he seems to be the starter. Pop Douglas, we've mentioned multiple times on the show, feels like the number one guy here right now, and clearly the most talented as of right now. Is there any reason for starting hope for either one of these guys this year, or is it kind of just let the rookies develop and maybe he's more of either of these guys are a next year play? Sean, we can start with you here.
I mean, they both keep getting like positive reviews in camp, so like that's as much as you can ask for right now. I don't know, like this offense is going to be tough, I think. So not a lot of touchdowns to go around. Like I like Brissett. I hate the offensive line, but I like both of these guys. I had them both as high day 2 wide receivers. So Like I like them both. I think you hold them, and one of them is going to do something. Maybe not like right away, but like second half of the year, one of them is going to flash, and you're going to be feeling pretty good about it.
James, any thoughts on Patriot receivers outside of KJ Osborne? I know you're a KJ Osborne guy.
Oh yeah, big KJ.
Ew, that guy sucks.
He's not very good. No, I agree with what Sean said. Man. What do you want me to say? He's
I just had to wait for a good time to use that.
Exactly.
Anyway, go ahead, James.
Yes, shitty Patriots receivers. No, I think
historically they're all shitty.
Yeah, I probably agree with Sean that like one of them could be useful later in the year. I don't see Pop Douglas as a number one receiver. I think he's more of a, I don't want to say gadget, but he's just like he needs like a different like alpha receiver to kind of draw the coverage more. So is Polk that guy? Is Baker that guy? Possibly. But yeah, it's the Patriots. Their offense is going to be good. You just have to hope that they're a bad team throwing. Maybe you get a couple of cheeky starts during bye weeks.
Yeah, I've kind of viewed them the same way. And like Sean said, we're really hoping just one of these guys kind of pops at some point during the season and maybe they're usable. Let's keep moving down the list. We have a couple of second-year receivers. I'll skip over Mitchell for a second. So we'll go to Michael Wilson and Marvin Mims here, second-year guys. Wilson, obviously takes a backseat now to Marvin Harrison. Where do you guys think he's a flex play at times of the season? Do you think are you lower on him? I'm pretty high on him as a talent. His biggest question has always been his health. He was literally hurt all the time in college. Was banged up last year at times. I just think he's a good player and truly fits well as a wide receiver too in an offense. How do you feel? We'll start with James here.
With Michael Wilson, I think, I think it could be challenging, but I think there could be some weeks and stretches where it makes sense to use them. I think the Cardinals are going to be in some of these games where there's just a lot of points, a lot of offense, with Marvin Harrison and Trey McBride and Murray back. And, James Conner is still a functional back. Like, I think there will be moments where the Cardinals are good. I think there'll be games where you have to stay away. But I think in those games where it projects to be like a lot of points, I think Michael Wilson could have some value. The problem is he's going to be probably fourth in the target share on that team. Like I said, behind Harrison, McBride, and then whatever they do in the running game.
Yeah, and I agree. Like Connor has always been a good receiving back, so it's just
like not necessarily target share, like more just like offensive weapon. Like he's like the fourth option, is what I'm trying to say.
Gotcha.
Yeah. And then
Sean?
Marvin Mims is sorry.
Go ahead. Yeah.
He's just that's a challenge. I think again. I don't trust the Broncos. I think he's going to be a tough player to think you can start on a week-to-week basis.
Yeah, I'm definitely nervous about even the thought of starting him because he gives me Devery Henderson vibes where it's like, okay, is he going to get his two for 70 and a touchdown, or is he going to give me 11 yards? I don't know.
I would view Mims as like borderline cuttable, to be honest. But for Wilson, like he just kind of feels like one of those guys that you're going to like a lot more, like in like real life than maybe as like fantasy. He's just like, I think he fills a role as like a nice quality, like second wide receiver on a team. But that being said, like I definitely like ceiling, I think he could push like best case, like push for like 100 targets and maybe like push like McBride as like the second like targeter on the team. I don't think that's going to happen, but I think that's best case scenario. I think Marv's pretty confident Marv's going to be the guy. But
yeah, Marv is going to be a monster. And I don't think anybody would really fight you on that at this point. He's very good. Adonai Mitchell, another guy here on the list, kind of just in this podge of upside guys. I traded for him. Obviously, I moved off Kendre Miller to get him. I think he's got very, very good upside. Obviously,
Pierce's backup.
It potentially could be, Sean, based on some of the reports.
All the first depth charts, it's just
that's such garbage.
Yeah,
don't put the rookies.
It's funny
first.
because like Alex Pierce did have like a couple of puff pieces come out Twitter wise, and it's like a couple of like highlights of him running an out route, and I was like, okay, he can actually run another route at least, like compared to last year's running straight every game. But I'm high on Mitchell's talent. I think he really could pop. I think he's a classic boomer bust prospect, and he's one of the guys that I'm actually really looking forward to watching this year. I don't think he's gonna be super usable this year, but just long term, I think he's a quality prospect. You guys see it differently at all, or kind of the same?
I just don't think he's better than the other two starters on this team, and it's gonna be a low passing volume offense. So I just don't. I don't see it this year. Like things could change, but not for me.
Nothing
Same.
crazy.
Yeah.
All right. Let's talk about somebody fun here. Quentin Johnston on the list, right? He is a question mark to say the least, right? And I clearly I've been throwing out offers for him, just kind of see what people are, what they're thinking on him, just to see feelers, and it's not looking good, man. It's really not looking good.
I mean, I'm not going to help your trade value if I talk, so you can move on if you want.
Hey, like you can say what you got to say about the guy. I mean, he's just not very good. I think everybody knows that at this point.
As far as like play wide receivers that got enough value by volume last year, I thought he was the worst receiver in the NFL.
He got a lot of targets, and it never looked good.
It was bad.
It's also tough just being thrown into that spot as a rookie. The Chargers were really bad. I'm not gonna give up completely on him on his career. I think it's not like the Chargers have slam dunks at receivers. Like again, I've seen all the reports. He's going to be wide receiver 4 on the team and everything. But I just think...
and to make this point before Eric does, like he was used terribly last year. The
Chargers were a mess. Like they were a freaking mess.
Like if you throw him into like the Rashee Rice role on Kansas City, he's not Rashee Rice, but like he would have been a lot more successful for sure.
I mean, the way things are looking, like he's kind of looks at this point like a less athletic Cordero Patterson, which is like sad because I loved Cordero Patterson too coming out, so it's kind of like not looking great for that. But yeah, Quentin Johnston. I mean, I'm thinking, at this point, I'd like to see what he can do in a different scheme. I think the Chargers too, on a week-to-week basis, can be very challenging to try to navigate the receiving core. Anyway, it could be a week-to-week thing, and of course, they're going to be a run-heavy team. So he's kind of just a hopefully things turn around kind of guy. I'm not going to talk too much about the rest of these guys on the list, but we could just kind of talk about the wide receiver room as a whole. Objectively looking at my team, I think I'm truly missing a wide receiver 1. I think I've been on record saying that. I think I don't truly have that, set in stone wide receiver 1 that a lot of other teams have, like a Jefferson, a Chase, or whatever. And it, getting down into the wide receiver 3 flex positions, it's kind of what killed my team last year. Is I didn't really know who to start week to week, and I feel like we could be in a very similar situation this year between wide receiver 3 and all throughout the flex spots where. A lot of my guys are very boom busty. I think this is it's a strong depth room, but there's almost too much depth at this point where it might be challenging to start week to week. So we can keep moving forward here to the tight end room. Once again, I feel like a pretty strong room here. I love my tight ends, as everybody knows. So I feel like I've gotten 3 very good ones, and then a guy that I don't know what to do with as usual. So it's that my team is always stocked with upside tight ends that I eventually ship off to James's team and hope that they break out like Jelani Woods. So so this year, I mean, my clear guy starting at least the year should be Dalton Kincaid. Getting a potentially better situation now that he'll have more target share in this offense. James, how do you feel about Kincaid in the overall tight end landscape this year? It's a much deeper tight end landscape this year.
Definitely is. No, I think he when I was looking back at some of the rankings and stuff, I was surprised. I thought he finished higher than he did. I think he was more of like wide tight end 15 or 16 last year. I don't know. I just thought, I just would have thought he was like closer to 10. So he wasn't. We are banking on a lot of there's no digs there, and Kincaid did. I think he finished strong-ish, but Dawson Knox is still there, and this isn't a Dawson Knox is going to steal his target share, but it's Dawson Knox steals his snaps, and that's in a way steals his opportunities. I think it's on the board that Jake Ferguson is still more useful because he's the clear second option in a high volume passing game where the Bills. I don't really know what their offense is going to be. I'm
intrigued to watch them. That's for sure.
12 personnel,
I just don't know.
Power gap.
Yeah. So So I think Kincaid will, like they'll use him as a vertical tight end. He'll have some big plays and stuff, but it may not be as consistent as Turd Ferguson.
I mean, I kind of echo that statement. I feel like they're very usable, both of them. I think Ferguson's probably going to end up a top 10 tight end pick in most redraft leagues. Sean, how do you view it?
Yeah, I mean, I have Kincaid like as a tier above Ferguson. I like them both. I mean, and we'll even get down to the next guy. Like you've like 3 of my top 11 tight ends. So like
it's funny because I feel like Bowers is most people's 11 tight end for some reason. I've seen so
yeah,
many of that.
I just did some like updating and stuff because I didn't give him like any rushing or anything when I first made the study, and I changed that.
Yeah, Mr. Fullback apparently.
But yeah, I mean Kincaid, I think he's got a really good chance to lead that team in targets. I know you said you're worried about. I'm not necessarily like worried about him like splitting snaps, but like they're probably going to be more or less on the field together a lot on that team, just with the lack of receiver. It's like high-end talent on that team. I think there's a lot of good depth guys on the Bills, but I mean, they took him in the first round last year. He like not counting a Sam Laporta, he had a very good season for a rookie tight end.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah, 673 yards, 73 catches, 2 touchdowns.
Yeah, like
I think the touchdown amount should go up. 2 touchdowns only is low.
Like I have a pretty big jump for Kincaid. I have him close to 1,000 yards and 7 touchdowns this year.
Wow, 1,000 yards.
That's a pretty significant jump for sure.
Yeah,
I mean, obviously, I would love that. Yeah, so between him and Ferguson, I feel like it could be a week to week thing. Depending on how things go. But if Kincaid gets off to a hot start, it might be very hard to bench him.
And Ferguson should have been a higher last year. He led all tight ends in red zone targets last year. So he was a little bit
brand new information to me.
Yeah,
I didn't know that. Yeah, I see that. And I want to be clear. Like Kincaid does have more of an upside than Ferguson does. But yeah, I mean, looking here, Ferguson was number 9.
71 catches, 761 yards, 5 touchdowns last year.
Again, a lot of it is because it's just 5 touchdowns instead of 2. That's probably how thin the line is for 9 versus 16. So I think it's going to depend. Again, can Kincaid get in the end zone, which is more random?
I mean, Ferguson had 102 targets last year. Like, does that go up? It's hard because they just don't have anything else.
Yeah, no, I think it'll be about the same.
I have him at 110.
Sure, yeah. So that seems reasonable. Yeah, about the same.
So going down to the third guy on the list, kind of the wild card of the group, Brock Bowers, wild card. Yeah, exactly. He clearly is one of the more talented tight end prospects in recent history. Goes to a very strange situation in the draft, obviously with Michael Mayer being on my team already, who I loved last year. I love both these guys, so I just couldn't not take Bowers too because of my affinity for tight ends, and I couldn't say no. Brock Bowers to me is one of the most physically gifted tight ends on tape that I've seen in a very long time. He just hits speeds that really shouldn't be hit by a receiving tight end that can block a little bit. Is very versatile. He got jet sweeps in college just because they had no other ways to get him the ball in his hand with all the talent they've had. So I mean, I think he's the only 2-time Mackey winner in recent, I think in the last like 20 years or something like that. So I mean, I think he's just a stud. It's just gonna be hard to project him this year as a rookie. I think with the quarterback situation, the fact that he's got Mayer in the room as well, who kind of profiles as more of like the true inline tight end. It's a very strange situation, but a lot of people are thinking like, I guess online are thinking Kincaid like production his rookie year maybe. Do you guys see it that way?
Good, James.
For Bauer, I think it's gonna be a challenge because it's Gardner Minshew and Aiden O'Connell. So
trust me, that's the number one problem.
I think that's where this conversation kind of just starts and ends. Like, I'm not really sure how useful the Raiders are going to be for fantasy. But I think Bowers is a great talent, and he'll certainly get the usage. It's not like Antonio Pierce assembled an impressive coaching staff. I'm not really too high on the Raiders from an offensive perspective this year. So
I think we're talking about Luke Getsy as the offensive coordinator as well.
Yeah,
it's not ideal.
Not great. So ideal. for both players, I don't have a whole lot of hope. I think you're going to be starting the top two, and you're
Letting
going
the other two marinate.
Yeah, that's what I see in this tight end room.
All right, we'll keep moving. We'll go to the special teams. I got a pretty thin special teams list here compared to Skip Elliott's 17 tight ends, or 17 defenses. I got Jake Elliott, obviously, quarterback, a classic quarterback kicker stack, if you will, with Jalen Hurts, and then my two defenses, the Chiefs and the Browns. The Chiefs have been kind of the mainstay of my team for a long time, so I feel pretty good about both of those defenses again.
Defenses, yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So going to the projected starters for this team, this is kind of how I laid it out. Obviously, with the suspensions for Addison kind of being up in the air, I kind of just threw him in there for now. But I do feel like those last two flex spots can kind of be interchangeable with a lot of folks on my team. So I guess that leads me to my next question. Obviously, James, you made the Dynabook lines. Where do you think this team finishes? Is this team ready for the championship run? Are we still not quite there? How do you view the team?
So I had this team third in the Dynabook rankings, but the Lionheads have made a very impassioned case that that they should be ahead of this team, maybe third or potentially even second. And I think there's merit to that. I think the Long Gamers for Sean is probably comfortably still the second team. I think with this team, like I said, the QB room is what's most impressive. And I think there's a lot of good things there. Again, with McCaffrey, we know what that needs to be. I think the overall depth on this team is what's strong. You have some tough cuts to make, which is something you got to do.
Yeah, we'll get to that here in a couple seconds.
But also you have future capital that you can use if you'd like. You have young players to trade, consolidate into other things if you want. So there's a lot of flexibility with this team, which is what Dynabook likes. But there's a challenge of, you got to start the right guys. And one thing that I see off the bat, and kind of just it aligns with what I was saying earlier. Like I just don't view Pickens better than Rice. I just think Rice proved more. And I think it's more of like a Pickens Warren in the flex thing is how I see it.
I see. Yeah, and I think when I was making this specific projected start is more or less just kind of playing the potential suspension in there, but it seems like that might not actually happen. So Sean, do you view it similarly? And then after that, you guys get to cut 5 of my players, so that'll be fun.
Ooh, fun. Yeah, I mean, we're going to keep disagreeing. I think Warren and Pickens should be started every week, but and
Sean wants to start 2 Steelers,
two
Arthur Smith players. I think this is
2
sabotage.
gold doubloons.
Sean, despite trading away good players, still knows the value
we got plenty of time to talk about Sean.
of getting the 2 seed. So he's trying to sabotage Eric into making him start 2 Steelers players. And Eric, I won't let you do it. Shrek won't let you do it. Do not start 2 Steelers players. You will lose week 1.
I don't want to do it either.
All right, good.
Considering how many stuffed animals I now own in my house, and I don't have.
You need a Nessie stuffed animal. Where's your Nessie?
It's really
animal?
disappointing right now. Yeah. Well, Sloan's asleep, so I'm not going in there and grabbing one. Right now.
Yeah, no, please don't.
You don't wake a sleeping toddler.
Yeah.
Scary stuff. No, I think you're a top 3 team. By the way, I don't know if I was supposed to answer that question, but I think this is a top 3 team. No, I think your quarterback and your wide receivers give you just enough of a bump above the running back situation with Vince that for me that I would go with your team.
Does the Christian McCaffrey latest development news though change that at all? No.
Yeah, that's kind of my next question. Is like if McCaffrey happens
for week 1, so no.
All right, who's going to be the 5 cuts on this team? I feel like there's a couple of easier ones perhaps in the wide receiver room here.
Perry.
I mean, probably the bottom 3, right?
Quentin.
I'll tell you what, Whittington, though. Gotta watch out for that kid.
Mims, Whittington.
Wait, so
you think Marvin Mims is the cut?
You're cutting Quentin or Marvin, Sean?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. I don't think, yes. Take him away.
I mean, Eric, I'm not gonna live trade for Quentin Johnson on the pod, but like I will pick him up in like.
Yeah, see, like that's the like
it's just, you're not,
I
you
have
don't
not
cut a. Like
I
I
have
think
not
Sean's just
considered
taken
cutting
off.
him yet.
Like you don't cut a first round pick. If I didn't have Eric, honestly, if I didn't have him in our other dynasty league, you and I probably would have already made a trade for him because I still think there's value. But I
There's
can't
something
justify
there.
I can't justify having 2 Quentin Johnsons. So
Nobody wants to quit.
One player that I put down as like a potential cut candidate was Michael Mayer, and it kind of hurt because I don't really want.
He's in the mix for a cut spot. I'll be honest with you.
He really got shafted. I feel bad.
It was a tough go for the guy. I mean,
but like when
I really thought he was a talented player.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't be because you have Bowers. It's almost like let's just keep the handcuff. Let's keep a former pick. I think there's probably a shithead running back we can cut.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, going back to the running backs, depending on how preseason goes, one of these guys could easily go, right? Like if it's a Lobby or a McLaughlin. I mean, I don't want to cut McLaughlin, but I might have to, just depending on.
Yeah, I think Lobby or McLaughlin maybe.
And usually I have at least 2 or 3 more tight ends to cut, but I've kind of shoved that down already. But I mean, Mayer is truly like you said, James. He's kind of the only like tight end handcuff. That's really even out there at this point.
I think he's.
Oh no, that's not true. Hold on, that's huge disrespect.
Yeah, very unlikely.
Very extreme. Because I love how you say likely too. All right. Anywho, let's keep this rolling. We'll go over to the long gainers. This is.
Shut up now.
I was gonna say Sean gets to take a break now. James, you're still on the hook. So we'll start with the quick facts for the long gamers. Won the championship. Obviously 8-6. We got the 2 squads here. 8-6 final record for the regular season. Points. His poor connection. Second most points in 2023. The 5th easiest schedule, right in the middle of the pack last year. Winning percentage since 2018. Right in the middle of the pack as well at 42-39. The transactions since 2018, he's got 259, which is the 7th most in the league. And then, of course, the one championship win last season. Pretty big season for all the long gamers fans out there. So we're going to just jump right into it, James. We got the quarterbacks. This is a pretty strong room here. I mean, I know you're a Jared Goff supporter. Obviously, you had him on your team at one point. We can start right there with Jared Goff, and then we'll come back to Lamar here in a minute.
Jared Goff.
Yeah, like what do you think he finishes? Obviously, last year was such a great year for him. Clearly, put him back in the. I mean, I remember at the beginning of the season, there was even going into last offseason, there was kind of like, oh, is he going to be the guy? He's now the guy. So
that was probably a tad. I like Jared Goff. I think the only problem for fantasy is that he doesn't give you any rushing, so it's like it's all dependent. But the Lions are like the hottest team, right? Everyone loves the Lions. Like they're going to be in these games where it's just shootouts, 30 points each way. Like you want a piece of that. Again, they also get some rushing touchdowns, but I think Goff has a safe floor. Well, he'll get you even 250, 300 yards. And he can have some huge blow up games. I think he's a great, high end QB too. Like if you're playing super flex, like or whatever 2 QB, like you're happy with him as your QB too. So I think he's a good functional, fantasy player. And I loved him on the Lambs. Had to move him to try and get some upside elsewhere, but he's a good player.
Yeah, I mean, 2 top 10 finishes in his last 2 seasons, finished 10 and 7 last year. 4,500 yards, 30 touchdowns, 12 picks, and like you said, absolutely nothing on the ground, but he's still managing to be in the top 10, which is pretty impressive. Yeah. A guy that does a lot more on the ground, Lamar Jackson here. Obviously Lamar, he 8 days ago, he's feeling wonderful, according to Roto World Classic Puff Piece. I guess he had some injury or some bug early in camp. Or
he was sick
like
again.
He's always got something.
Yeah, it's either he's trying to take a dump during the game or something's going on with him. It feels like quite a bit. He's somehow only 27. I feel like he's so much older in my head. But he's been in the league for, I think this is going to be his 7th season. So he came in obviously very young. So he's set up for his age 28 season right now. He finished quarterback 4 last year, 3,600 yards, 24 touchdowns, 7 picks, contributed 821 yards on the ground, 5 touchdowns. Obviously lost a lot of the goal line work last year to Gus Edwards. He gets Derrick Henry to kind of step pretty much 1-for-1 into that role. Is quarterback 4 here, James? Is that the ceiling, or do we think there's still?
No, I mean the ceiling
the
is
one finish is
ceiling
still
is
in the cards.
the ceiling is probably still QB1 or 2. I mean, with Allen and Mahomes there, probably 4 is where he's properly ranked, because even like a guy like Jalen Hurts even does more of the offense because the Ravens defense has been better. So it's like there's some games where like they don't need Lamar to go as crazy as many times as some of these other quarterbacks have gone. The problem with Lamar is like there's some games where he just like sucks out of nowhere, but he's so good that you can't like not play him. So it's just, look, he's one of the elite assets of the game. You play him, and the games where he's hurt or sick or whatever and he doesn't play, you don't. But you try not to get too cute with him because he is the offense. So it's like he's just one of those players that like everything, about what the Ravens do in offense, like it starts and stops with him.
Right, and his rushing floor is just absurd. I mean, he averages basically 150 carries on the ground every single year. We'll throw in somewhere between 5 to 7 touchdowns every year. I love him. I mean, I feel like even this year in redraft formats, like he seems like a great value pick at this point. I mean, there's just so much talent now, like we were talking about earlier at the quarterback position, where I feel like in years past, as we got to QB6, QB7, it's kind of dropped off a little bit. Like it feels like this year, you can get down all the way to, middle to, quarterback 12, 13 and still find really quality players. So maybe his value has been pushed down to quite a little bit in redraft, but I'm a huge fan, obviously, and he's an elite asset for Dynasty. Then we get into the 2 rookies. Sean, actually, let me give you some room here to talk to about your top 2 quarterbacks. Do you have any specific thoughts on projections or where they might finish?
I mean, Lamar is the man.
He's
like
Lamar.
Jake said, like he's either putting up 50 or he's putting up 15. It's great. It's really great.
It's tough to watch.
Well, it's not. But yeah, I mean, Lamar's great. Like I can't wait to see him in like year 2 of this offense with this OC. I think
that's a good point.
Considering he won the MVP, it probably a little bit of a Mickey Mouse MVP last year, just based off of other years. But like, I think he's gonna be better. I mean, I say Flowers in year 2. He gets Mark Andrews back. Hopefully, he plays the whole year. Yeah. But I mean, it definitely could be like fighting for QB1. I have him at 4 again, and then Goff. He only plays 3 outdoor games the entire year. Jared Goff is a fucking maniac inside the dome, so I like that for him. And one of his games is outside in California. So, is that really outside?
Debatable.
Who's to say?
Yeah.
But I mean, they're both great. I've got Goff more in like that Purdy like tier of like starting quarterbacks this year. But yeah.
And then you got your 2 rookies here. So we got May and McCarthy, both late round draft picks this year in our draft. James, is there what are we feeling with these 2 quarterbacks? I mean, obviously, I feel like everybody kind of pretty much unanimously agrees that May was probably the better prospect of the 2. Do we think May gets in there when, if at all?
I think this year, around week 6, 7, something like that. I don't know. I don't have their schedule in front of me, but like whenever their bye week is, maybe around there.
Let me see if I can pull it up.
I'll look at
it. I don't think you're starting Drake May though at all. I think McCarthy could be. Yeah, McCarthy only is an option, right? Obviously if it's a bye week for Lamar or something, and he's in there with Jefferson and they're rolling. But no, these are more long-term hold kind of guys. And I think one of them could hit, but I think there's a good chance one of these guys busts, but that's fine.
Yep, if 1 out of the 2 hits, that's good.
Yeah, it's not like
I think in this league, 3 is a good number at the quarterback position.
Yeah.
And that's what you really need to kind of get by. All right, we can roll along to
one of those guys to turn into like a startable quarterback, just so I have a 30. That's really what I was going for with taking 2 guys.
Yeah, no, that's
I looked at your quarterbacks too just to see what kind of bye week situations they had. Looks like they have different buys, so you're set there for the season at least. All right, so running backs, obviously a big reason this team eventually took it all last year. Kyron Williams and Raheem Mostert, just absolute superstars last year for this squad. I kind of moved Raheem Mostert maybe down 1 peg, just with maybe an upside of, Achane taking a little bit more this year. But of course that can, based on last year, he's clearly the number 1 and 2 running backs. Kyren Williams, obviously Blake Corum coming in. I feel like a lot of people have kind of settled on Blake Corum just being the clear backup and the handcuff and, not really eating into his touches. Maybe as people initially thought. James, do you think Kyren Williams will replicate that season from last year? Do you think it's going to be a step down? And what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I'm not sure if he'll completely replicate it. I think as the year goes on, I think Corum could take a little bit more, but I do think it's going to be more of a straight handcuff where like I think McVay, but like these offenses, like they do like using one back to kind of like create that illusion of, you don't know when we're passing and running. Like it's good to have kind of the same back on the field. So I think Kyren, as long as he's healthy and rolling, like he's going to be great. Like the Rams actually all of a sudden have rebuilt their line and it's one of the better units again. So it's all systems go for me on Kyren.
Yeah, that offensive line is huge. Just mammoth offensive linemen. And then Kyren Williams only 5'9". It's impossible to even find him behind that line. Finished last year, RB4, 228 carries, 1,144 yards, 12 touchdowns in just 12 games. So, there's room for even more, with a fully healthy year. So I do agree. I feel like that trade, I think it was with Vince, it was Kyren Williams for Dak Prescott, a 3rd and a 4th, obviously paid dividends last year for your squad. And it seems like for future years to come here, Kyren Williams seems locked in as an RB1. Next on the list, I got Alvin Kamara. Obviously, we'll talk about Mostert here in a second. We did kind of talk about him a little earlier, but Kamara seems to be, he's reported the training camp. I know there was, some sort of contract talk going on there again for some sort of extension. I just don't see that happening. Not with their current situation. He's too hungry to spit up his food, according to Brandon Ayuk. So I don't see that happening. But Sean, I would like to get your thoughts here on Kamara, just because obviously you're probably closest to the situation. Kendre Miller clearly is getting poo-pooed by Dennis Allen. Jamal Williams really took a step back last year. It pretty much doesn't exist at this point. So, how are you feeling about Kamara this year? And is it somebody that are you trying to move? Because I know you've moved other assets on this team, or is this kind of just hold and let it ride?
I mean, if I like the price on something, I'm not afraid to make a trade, regardless of my situation. If it makes my team better in the long run, I'm usually in for it. But with Kamara, this year, I view him as a flex level running back. I don't think he's a top, in the running back 1 or running back 2, maybe fringe RB2, just because it's a standard league. If this was half PPR or full PPR, probably in that discussion. But it's tough. This team does not, they did not score a lot of touchdowns on the ground last year. And we'll see with the OC changing, how that affects it, since they've had the same OC for 20 years. But
yeah, it's interesting. You did finish 24th last year for the running back position. He played 13 games, 180 carries, 694 yards, 5 touchdowns, but did pitch in 75 catches, 466 yards, and just 1 touchdown. So, he had 86 targets last year in just 13 games. So it's, Derek Carr dump offs are a real thing.
Yeah, they are.
Yeah. James, what do you think about Kamara this year?
I think the Saints are ready to implode. And I think they're going to be one of these teams that I think Dennis Allen is a good bet for first coach fired and all that kind of stuff.
What's that line look like? That's the one I want.
Yeah. I just think Kamara could be kind of a casualty of that sort of thing on the worst case scenario, right? Where it's the Saints have a lost season and they just try out some younger players or whatever. But Kamara's still the best because Kendre Miller kind of sucks. Jamal Williams is fine, but what is he really? He scores some touchdowns. Okay, Kamara.
The other running back on that team is Taysom Hill. It's not any of those other guys.
Okay, sure. Yeah, Taysom Hill will still. Yeah, whether it's Taysom Hill or Jamal Williams, somebody's always been stealing goal line carries from Kamara, and that's never been a problem because it's the passing and it's the receiving work. So Yeah, as long as he's playing, he's going to be fine. But I think there's team risk that the Saints are that bad and things implode. But he, as a player, you know what you're going to get.
I mean, I think I said this on an earlier podcast, but if Olave goes down, I think this team is so screwed. Like they
They
just
have
don't
nothing.
have really anything else. And
No.
then they don't even have. I mean, obviously Sean's a big Rashid Shaheed supporter, but like outside of that, they just have absolutely nothing. I mean, I could easily see this being a complete just dumpster fire by midseason, but on the same time, like the Saints just find a way to like hang around a lot of times. So who knows?
Yeah, I think it's gonna end this time, man. Dennis Allen sucks. Like
He does stink. There's no doubt.
I don't know.
He's definitely should be the first coach fired, but just given how that ownership like handles things, he won't get fired until after the year.
You're probably right, but
So I don't know if I would bet on that one. He should have been fired last year, or because he's like his coaching record, like his win-loss record is hilarious. By the way,
Is it Hugh Jackson bad?
He's
well, yeah, he had some bad years with the Raiders.
And weren't they 9-8 last year too? And it's still terrible.
Yeah, it's not ideal. I always joke that like as long as Taysom Hill's on the team, they're not going to do anything. It's just my running joke at this point. But we can keep moving along here. Raheem Mostert, we did talk about him a little bit earlier. How are we feeling overall? I mean, obviously last year, RB2 finish, 209 carries, 1,012 yards, 18 touchdowns. I think we both said, or y'all both said earlier on that the touchdown numbers are probably going to come down there. So where does that leave him, I guess, at this point? James, go ahead.
I think he's still in probably like more of like the back end RB2 kind of conversation. I mean, I haven't, that's like off the top of my head. I haven't really even like looked for him, like what he's like ranked on Sleeper, but I feel like I'd be comfortable with him there in that regard. Like, I think we want players who are on elite offenses that have roles. I think he's still going to get some goal line carries. I think in our league where we start as many players as we do, he's an obvious like asset to have. It could get weird in redraft down the road with him. Like I said, if Achane really is rolling, and like I said, I don't think. I mean, I know he's a rookie, but like they're going to use Jalen Wright, and also is the Dolphins line going to be as good? They
lost Robert Hunt. That's a big
Robert
one.
Hunt and Connor Williams, who got hurt.
He just signed with Seattle.
And he signed with somebody else, right? Yeah. So like,
might be a step down.
Yeah, but there's a lot of talent there. We know what the Dolphins are. It's 18 touchdowns. That's not happening. If he gets half of that, be happy, honestly.
Yeah, I feel like 10 would be a really great finish to the season. And I mean, I guess it's so strange. His career arc has been so interesting. I mean, he'd never had more than 150 carries in any of his first 6 seasons. This is going to be his 9th season in the league, and he's only had 180 carries last year and 209 the year before this last year. So I mean, it's like
wild.
Despite being 32, he almost has like no wear and tear because he's been injured pretty much all the time. But as far as like overall miles, he really doesn't have it. So it's like he's a hard guy to project, I think, for this season, because like, can he put it together again? He averaged 4.8 yards per carry, 4.9 the year before. So he's definitely been efficient. And obviously the offense is excellent. So I feel like, he could end up being a pretty nice value pick in redraft. It's just a matter of if he stays healthy or not, more or less. And that's always his question, isn't it? Like every single year.
Yeah.
So anywho, we can move on here to Javonte Williams. We talked slightly about him earlier with the Audrey Estime discussion, but Javonte coming off a pretty rough year last year, James, not really doing a whole lot, and obviously coming off of a major injury. Is this the bounce back year? Are you excited for Javonte Williams this year, James?
Excited is not a word I use. It's like, like there was all that BS earlier in the offseason about like, oh, is Javonte Williams even going to have his roster spot? And it's like, all right.
Yeah,
like,
getting cut and stuff.
This is clearly more Sean Payton mind games, which, that comes with the territory. With Javonte, he's a good player. I don't trust the team at all. Sean Payton wants to use Audrey Estime. I think Devin Singletary is going to be a more reliable starter for this team. That's my mini hot take for you.
Mini hot take. Yeah, I mean, last year, RB 32 finish. He played all 16 games, 217 yards, 774 carries for 3.57 yards per carry.
Yeah, the yards per carry wasn't good. And I just, the Broncos aren't good. And I think Sean Payton loves to, he loves to go down swinging with his own guys. And when the going gets tough, he's going to put in his own guys instead of Javonte.
Interesting. And this is going to be his contract year as well, his fourth year in the season. Yep. So,
and they're not going to want to pay. They're not going to want to re-sign him. So they're just going to like, oh, we're just going to like move on and like use other guys.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like he has a pretty limited upside this year. Sean, I will give you the chance to chime in on Javonte. Where do you see him in terms of the running back landscape?
I mean, I
guess here, put him next to your Devin Singletary comparison just for shits and gigs.
Where is Singletary? I've got Singletary at 30, and I've got Javonte at 25 running back. So
they're not terribly far apart.
They're not that far off. I mean, I still like Javonte. He's a year away from the injury now, like coming back.
Only 24.
He's lost weight, like in the offseason.
Younger than Dylan Lobby.
That's always that's tough.
2 years younger than Charlie Jones for James' team.
That's tough.
Hey, don't you talk shit about Charlie Jones. You take that back.
You should. I love it. It's so funny.
But Charlie, I mean, I think he's still clearly going to get the most volume on this team. Like, I'm not really that concerned with Audric Estime. He was a day 3 pick. Like, I'm not going to respect a day 3 pick until like I see it. Like, I'll be happily wrong about it until I see it.
Yeah,
but
that's fair.
There's not many of them that hit.
Biggest fear for me is like maybe losing a little more of the pass game to like McLaughlin. Like that would be
that's the thing. Like I don't even know if it's estimated, but like you have PP Ryan here who he may get cut, but like they have McLaughlin.
I don't think Piran's on this team next year or
this other rookie. Okay, I just think the Broncos are already a bad team, and I think he's not going to get a high enough share of the backfield to make him a reliable starter. That's what I think about Javonte.
Yeah, I think they're going to be in some bad game scripts. They're going to have to end up in third down situations more often.
I think he's going to be a tricky player to like. He's not going to be a player that you can just like trust every week to start. You're going to have to like, do I really trust him this week in this matchup?
Just because I'm curious, James, what do you think the Broncos finish wise? What record are we looking at? You think? Just because you've been pretty down on the Broncos, I'm curious.
I mean, probably five or 6 wins. I don't think they're. Yeah, I think they're just in that mediocreville. I think.
Do you think they're better than the Raiders this year?
One. That's a fun.
Actually, I do because I think Pierce, unfortunately, and that team, I think they're going to get exposed on their scheme, and I think Bo Nix may or may not be, but Bo Nix with Sean Payton is better than whatever the Raiders have. And Devontae Adams
and Gardner Minshew, James.
Devontae Adams.
It sounds so much worse when you say it out loud.
Yeah,
Luke Getsy and Gardner Minshew.
It's terrible.
Devontae Adams fear in the hearts of everyone.
Traded. Yeah,
not ideal. Okay.
One last thing, like the running backs get so heavily used in Sean Payton's system that like even in like bad game scripts, I still think they're gonna get the ball a lot, and like they don't really have anybody that's going to be taking away like targets or work from them. Like Cortland Sutton's the one. I like Cortland Sutton. We're going to talk about him, but I mean, outside of that, I don't really love any of the receivers on this team. Greg Dulcich is a wild card for sure. He could be something this year. Wouldn't surprise me, but I don't know. I just think it's going to be a lot of check down Charlie work for sure.
Yeah. So let's move on here. You said you had Singletary in the 30 range. I'm a big Singletary supporter in the role that he's probably going to play, which is that 1 and 2 down, early down thumper, potentially on the goal line as well. There's definitely going to be a role for him. I know if you've watched any of the Giants Hard Knocks offseason, they seem to really like him. And they seem to be very okay with him being the guy now that Barkley is gone. I think it's a limited upside kind of guy. But at the same time, running backs that get carries, especially in this format with 3 flex as well, they definitely have value. So, James, do you feel something similar on Singletary? Or you higher or lower?
Yeah, like I said, I like him as a player. I think he's he's a player that coaches like to use in their offense because he's trustworthy. He, gets positive yards, all that. Has spurts where he's really productive. I think there's games where like I said, like you'll know not to start him and things like that. Where if the Giants are projected to be in a bad game script, but no, overall, I think he's a good guy to kind of like work into the flexes based on matchups and such.
Yeah, and he's a 26-year-old running back. This is his 6th year in the league, so feels like he's been around for a long time. He's pretty much averaged 4.5 yards per carry pretty much his entire career. So he should be getting plenty of work this year and should be a useful player for fantasy purposes.
And the connection
now, he
used to be on the Bills too with like Dayball and stuff. So there's some of that familiarity. Like I just think that.
Yes. It seems like he really liked him on the Hard Knocks episodes as well.
Yeah.
So this is kind of where the drop-off happens at this running back room, in my opinion. Kind of looking for some upside guys here. Obviously, Kamani Vidal, we kind of talked about him earlier with, Gus Edwards and J.K. Dobbins pretty ahead of him on the depth chart as of right now. Maybe even Jarrett Patterson, who knows? But it's kind of just a long shot here. But, upside running backs are good to have. And I actually thought he was a very solid running back on tape. So I like the pick at the time, and I think it's a good guy to have on the roster. Any thoughts on Vidal, James?
Yeah, I mean, I think, like the profile is interesting as kind of either like a 2-down or pretty like every down back. If, Gus, Bus, and JK get injured like they have in the past. And it's always interesting too when you have like an empty slate, like like a new coach who he brings in new free agents and draft picks. So it's like nobody really has a leg up, right? So it's like it feels like it increases the chances of someone like Vidal hitting, but at the same time though, he is a 6th round pick, so we can't get too excited. But I think it's a worthy player to roster. We'll talk about the other part of the transaction. I think there were like I don't think he's a player I that's like super exciting to have, but I think he's there's definite upside.
Yeah, I think you could do worse, kind of towards the bottom of your running back roster. I mean,
Yes,
obviously
for
we've
sure.
seen, some of the teams we've already discussed, the bottom of the running back room is, oh, that's an easy cut. Whereas I don't think this guy is an easy cut as of right now, just because there is, that hope that he could actually be something. So another guy in a similar vein, probably with better upside early on, is Tyrone Tracy. A bit of an older prospect as well, but a reasonably high draft pick in the 5th round for a running back isn't terrible. And he's only been playing running back for like 2 years, so there's some potential for some. 1 year. Sean says I'm caught slacking here. But yeah, he's got upside for sure because he's only been playing the position for a very short amount of time. So the Giants clearly saw something in him. And if you watched any of the Hard Knock stuff, they seem to really have this guy as kind of like a priority late round draft pick for their team. So there's not a ton of competition in this backfield outside of Singletary. So I feel like there's going to be a very high chance that Tyrone Tracy is the kick returner for this team to start. If he flashes in that role, I could see them giving him more and more work, depending on game scripts and whatnot. I feel like they'll probably end up being in some pretty bad game scripts this year again, and giving him more 3rd down work because I just don't think Singletary is that guy. But I think there's definite upside here. James, what do you think about Tracy?
Yeah, I think it's good to kind of pair him with Singletary on this team too. I think the upside as an explosive player on the Giants is something they definitely need. So that's good. Like Singletary is a perfect kind of like it's like your meat and potatoes running back. So Tracy profiles as a nice compliment too. We'll see if the talent translates and the no experience and the Giants don't have a good line. So like, are there going to be holes again? Teams aren't stupid. They're gonna say, oh wow, this Tracy guy's actually one of, like they'll actually key in on him because who else are you covering on the Giants? Like Theo Johnson? I don't think so. So
yeah, I just feel like there's a real chance too that Tracy is a huge bum and doesn't do anything because he has no real experience.
That's what I'm saying. But there's there's upside there. It's a good player to take a flyer on.
Yeah, I mean, at the bottom of your roster, once again, just another guy that's nice to have. So I think these last four guys probably aren't super
No, I think
time valuable at this point. Maybe Patterson, just because we already talked about him a little bit, but like I don't feel great about the other three.
no. I mean, it would have to be a Vidal injury or if Gus and JK are really injured. Like, no, all three of these guys are really just pure. I mean, they're just pure handcuff type backs, but I think when you're a competing team, I think it's important to note that you want to hold on to some of these type of players. So, we don't have to.
I think all
them one
three
by
of these
one.
backs might be running back threes on their own team at this point. I mean,
That's fair, but they could still be cut. But these are the types of players that you just. It's not sexy, but you got to kind of grin and bear it at some positions, and you got to just hold depth. And I think.
Hey,
right.
John Harbaugh said that they view Justice Hill as a running back one.
Yeah, well, that's.
I got to tell you, I don't agree with that one bit.
Nope, me either.
All right. Well, on that note, we're moving to wide receivers. Not a huge list here. Definitely, when I was making this slide, I was kind of surprised by the sheer volume because
we're holding more of those
for the sake of accuracy. I dropped Jamari Thrash and I picked up Jordan Mason earlier today.
Okay, there we go. So we can drop another.
So even more head running backs.
Yeah. Well, Jordan Mason is currently the RB1 on San Francisco.
He's the starter right now. If I had fucking any roster space, I would have picked him up.
It's gonna hold.
Anywho,
sure.
Yes.
Well, he was already pushing as the backup to McCaffrey before the injury stuff, and with him and.
I mean, I don't think I've ever seen Mitchell healthy for longer than 3 weeks.
Shockingly, Elijah Mitchell is hurt too. I don't know.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, I don't think.
What I mean, like, he's probably gonna end up being the backup, and I'll take.
Has Elijah Mitchell ever had a 4-week stretch where he's healthy? I don't think so.
The year that he wasn't he like an RB2? Like
there was one year I think he was on Alex's team. I want to say.
Yeah. To the moon. I remember that.
Yeah, he was very high on him. Anywho, Tyreek Hill, the headliner of the group, and not too far behind him is St. Brown. But we'll start with Hill. Obviously, just had an absurd last season with the Dolphins. I'm gonna pull up the stats real quick because I want to just read them off again because they were so crazy. So wide receiver 2 on the year, despite having just about 1,800 yards, 13 touchdowns, 171 targets. Had 170 targets the year before. So it's unbelievably, he had 119 catches both years and 170 targets and 171 targets the year before. So very consistent in terms of his overall usage year to year. James, does that usage change at all for you this year? Or is it the exact same?
No, it's going to be the exact same. What'd you say?
119 catches, 170 targets.
Yeah, sure. Why not? Look, it's Tyreek. I wasn't sure if they'd give him the extension, but they were wise to do it. Tyreek's got a lot of
kids.
That's what I was looking for.
Many kids.
A lot of
the modern day Antonio Cromartie.
Yeah, a lot of child support.
He's got to keep playing football.
A lot of child support coming, and that's fine. That's fine. Everyone likes to have a good time. But
yeah, he's something else as a guy, but
I mean, as a talent, he's the best.
I mean,
he's so
just
good.
Watching him play is truly a treat. Like, he is so fast, he is so agile. I mean, this is his age 30 season. There's been no signs of him slowing down. He's actually had his 2 best years last 2 years. It just doesn't seem to be slowing down anytime soon. So, is there any? I mean, in a redraft league, we'll put it in this phrasing, from at the top of the draft, are you taking Tyreek as the number 1 receiver, or are you taking somebody else like Lamb? I know you're a Lamb supporter.
Yeah, I mean, it's him or Lamb, but Lamb with this training camp stuff, maybe not. I probably would just take Tyreek because Lamb's going to be in, just the fallout of all this camp. It's like enough to just make him number 2. I probably would take and that's also me probably speaking through the lens of, I don't like to double up, but Lamb and
I would take Lamb. So
yeah, so but that's how good both these guys. Like, what are we talking about here? It's Tyreek. He's
sick.
He's amazing.
All right, so let's go to St. Brown here. Obviously on the championship trophy that Sean's wearing, a huge piece to this puzzle last year for this championship team. He goes from wide receiver 23 his rookie season, wide receiver 9 his sophomore season, then wide receiver 3 last year, 1,515 yards, 10 touchdowns, 119 catches on 164 targets. I mean, he was a massive piece to the Lions' success last year. Obviously, him and Laporta pretty much being the entire passing game for the most part. With one more year in the system now, same offensive coordinator, is there any reason to believe that this changes? From a year-to-year basis, James, are we looking at another top 5 type season, or is maybe an increase in other people's usage going to bring this down?
No, I think I think he's still headed for another top 5 season. I don't think Jameson Williams at wide receiver 2 does enough to really warrant to take it away. I think Laporta is great, but tight ends and receivers, there's enough to go around for an elite wide receiver and an elite tight end. So I think Amon-Ra St. Brown is all. There's no reason to think, he won't be a wide receiver 1 again, top 5. I'd feel comfortable taking him in the first round in a lot of formats this year. So
yeah, I mean, he's uber consistent. He's really only missed 2 games in 3 seasons.
Yeah.
I mean, I can't think of anything negative. I mean, obviously Ben Johnson coming back is such a massive piece to this, and I can't imagine he's not going to use him the same way he's already been using it, maybe even more. So I'm loving it. And then next, I guess, is a more interesting player because he's been involved in some of the offseason moves, and James will have lots to say about this. But, Drake London coming over in a big trade in the offseason. Obviously London with Arthur Smith last year, 905 yards, 2 touchdowns. Year before, 866 yards, 4 touchdowns. About 110 targets each season. So he's a little bit of a projection at this point. Obviously, he was traded for AJ Brown, who is significantly less of a projection. James, what were your thoughts on the trade first, and then, where do you think, Drake London this year finishes overall?
I mean, I think I've made my thoughts pretty clear on the trade, and it's mostly on the. It's the context surrounding it for me, right? It's like AJ Brown is already he's in the tier again that we were talking about of 6 receivers, and this team had 3 of them and just opted out. In a year where the rest of the team is still pretty good, in a year where trying to do title defense, I just thought keeping AJ Brown would have made sense. Obviously, I understand the long gamers. Sean here said he likes to look to the long term, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's just tough because now you're with London. It's like to possibly get back to the same spot this team was. Do we need London to reach AJ Brown numbers, which was like 1,300 yards, 8 to 10 touchdowns kind of stuff, right? Like, do we think that's possible for London? I guess. It's tough to project it when we haven't seen it yet. We know the talent's in there. Again, we can't be caught being hypocrites because we love to shit on Arthur Smith. So it's like, all right, he doesn't have Arthur Smith. So that's a good thing for Drake London. At the same time, though, let's see how all the new offense and all the newness kind of gels for the Falcons, right? It's not a guarantee everything's going to work right off the bat.
Right. It might take a minute to start up here.
But look, I get it. Like, London, when he was drafted high for a reason, he was a good prospect. There's been some pretty good underlying numbers and stuff, even despite some of the jackassery that's gone on with the Falcons and all the bad quarterback stuff. Like just in a vacuum, being the wide receiver 3 on a dynasty team is really good. It's just this team already had an elite 3-pack, but in a vacuum, Drake London as wide receiver 3 that's where you want to be in dynasty. So I can't really critique that too much.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. Like from a title defense standpoint, having the sure thing seems great, but then of course too, like there's another side with, Drake London's only 23. Year 3 breakout is a real thing for receivers as well. There's tons of upside for this offense, and I guess from an NFL perspective, we can kind of mention this because I don't think we've really talked too much about the Falcons as a team. We've talked about individual players, but from a Falcons perspective, do you have any inkling of a potential Broncos situation where the hype is, huge with Russell Wilson coming in, Obviously, they had some pieces like a Cortland Sutton, Jerry Jeudy at the time. The offense didn't really work the first few weeks of the season. Didn't really ever figure it out. Nathaniel Hackett leaves. Like, is there a world where this could happen to the Falcons, where Raheem Morris kind of just loses control and it kind of implodes, or do you think this is a different situation?
I think the offense, it's probably good enough still. Like, there's enough talent there. Like, the offensive line is pretty highly regarded too for the Falcons. So I think that gives them more of a floor. I
also like Zach Robinson quite a bit too.
Yeah, I don't think it's going to be that bad. If anything, I think the Bucs are being written off as, like, I don't know why they're not the favorite in the division, but that's not what we're here for. The Falcons, though, yeah, they're a team that should be in contention for the playoff spot and definitely for the division. And their offense, we do expect to be better. So
interesting. Yeah, I kind of had to ask the question because I feel like every year we're kind of looking for that next like jump team, but then there's always a team that feels like they're overhyped. Obviously, like the Jets seem to be every year, and the Broncos that single year. So I guess I could ask this question before we keep moving on. Is there any other team that you see out there kind of in that boat where it's like, okay, this is a high hype team that really can implode? Maybe other than the Jets, obviously, because that seems like the obvious answer. But do you see anything like that out there, Sean or James?
The Niners.
I can let you think about it too as we continue moving on here. The Niners. Yeah, I guess Sean's totally off the Niners this year.
Well, if you trade Ayuk and Trent Williams doesn't want to play, like, what are we looking at with the Niners? Like, that's worst case scenario for sure, and I don't think that's going to happen. But like, that's there. Trent Williams
in the realm of possibility.
Old, like, he's like, isn't he like 36? Like,
the fact that he is asking for a new contract is actually kind of insane. Like,
he deserves it. He's the best football player on the planet.
I understand that, but it's like, dude, you're 36, bro. Like, what are we? I'm interested to see what kind of money he wants. Like, that's really what it comes down to. But it seems like a lot to ask for when your team's already kind of in a cap crunch situation to be.
And the price just went up with the Wirfs contract too.
That's very true. Yeah, Wirfs got the bag, as they say. So outside of London here, we can continue to move down the list. So I think there's a pretty obvious drop off here now as well. Sean, obviously, with Hopkins being sidelined here for a little while, not ideal. But I think the depth of the team, at the receiver position is clearly Hopkins and Sutton, and then with maybe even another tier drop after that with Palmer. Look, we could talk about the veterans here with Hopkins and Sutton. I feel like I'm getting more scared about Hopkins as the days keep moving. And I feel less and less hyped about him every single day. So, but go ahead.
Yeah, like a knee injury at 32 in the preseason is not a good sign. Like, and it's the Titans. Like,
Titans with Will Levis, and there's a lot of things.
I'm not feeling Hopkins right now. It's a tough one. I feel
like in redraft overall ADPs, like he might bottom out here pretty soon.
Before the injury, you prefer Hopkins or Ridley on that team?
Before the injury.
Neck
and neck. Probably Ridley.
Hopkins 75 for 1,000. What was Ridley last year?
I just feel like last year is like tough to even judge Ridley on.
I mean, his first year back.
I mean, apparently he's so mismanaged there anyway.
They had like identical years. It's funny.
I don't know. I think I'd just go Ridley just based on youth. Probably.
Yeah.
I mean, he's 30. It's not like
I'm not saying he's like young, but I'm saying he's younger than Hopkins and doesn't have a knee injury. So
he's 29.
Yeah, I would have gone like trying to be because I am obviously biased because I've got Hopkins, but I probably would have gone Hopkins of those two before, just because I think Ridley just profiles more as like a wide receiver 2 on a football team than he does a 1.
I feel like Hopkins too, just overall, like his play style, where he's never really been much of a giant separator. Like he could probably last a little bit longer at his game style than maybe other folks can. So I definitely don't want to write off Hopkins. That's not what I'm saying. But it's the vibes are low on him right now. I'll put it that way.
Second,
Sean, go ahead.
real
Sorry.
quick question: if you guys put a good whatever quarterback you want to think of as like a good quarterback on this Titans team, do you think they're like a playoff contender this year?
So, like, if you're saying good, would you say like
whatever you want to constitute as like a good quarterback? That's fine with me because I know we have like Kirk Cousins before he tore his Achilles last year was a good. He was
just like a solid quarterback overall.
Yeah.
I mean, I still don't know. Their offensive line is.
I think their defense still needs some work too.
And like the receiving talent is whatever. I don't know. I go back to there's a lot of pass catching talent in the league these days. Hopkins and Ridley, two 30+ receivers who are fine. I'm not saying they're bad, but okay. Like to me, it's just like okay, like you pass like the test. Like you're not like you're just kind of average of the Titans.
I feel the same way about their running backs too. To be honest,
yeah, that's what I'm saying.
I don't feel like super strongly towards that running back room.
And Boyd is he's an average veteran receiver. Burks
30 probably
kind of just busted. So
yeah, they're just a tough team to like.
They're just kind of like there. Yeah, Will Levis is whatever. The new coach.
He's one of the big wild cards for me this year, just because like he dropped back and like was instantly like getting killed.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah,
back last year, so it's hard to tell.
It reminded me of probably a lot of his last year at Kentucky as well. He's just getting smoked every year. Yeah. I mean, he's probably just like thankful that they have any upgrade at the offensive line position this year. So
yeah, I mean they got solid center. Drafted left tackle, got the best offensive line coach in the NFL. That's a pretty good upgrade.
Yeah, it should be a huge upgrade for him. All right, we'll move to Courtland Sutton here. Sutton obviously had quite a few touchdowns last year. He had 10 of them. He only had 59 catches for 772 yards on 90 targets, finished as wide receiver 28. James obviously has said multiple times he's not feeling the Broncos so far this year. But is a 28 or above year still wide receiver 28, I should say, in the cards here?
Of all the players on the Broncos, this is the one player that I think is usable because it's like he's kind of proven it. He's proven it enough times that he's like at least going to be an option. He's good in the red zone, which in our standard format scoring is important. Again, I think he's a good flex player. It's always an interesting thing. I think it kind of comes back. I'll levy a similar thought that I did to Eric's team on the, don't start 2 Steelers players. Don't start 2 Broncos players, Javonte and
I do what I want.
All right. I mean,
he doesn't have a Nessie to respond, so
do so at your own risk.
I don't imagine Sutton as a starter, but if Hopkins isn't ready week 1, we'll see. But But I mean, I'd probably start Josh Palmer over him.
I was gonna say Josh Palmer is kind of interesting here.
I like Josh Palmer
as we get further down. I'm a fan of the player. I think he's going to play a lot.
When he's
it's just a matter of how much.
He said good yards per game and stuff. I think, everyone rushing to crown Ladd as the insta wide receiver 1. I'm not sure that's in reality that's going to be true when Palmer's, third-year pro now has again not had amazing success, but has had some moments and pockets of being pretty good. So, yeah.
I mean, I like Palmer coming out, and I'll say underrated random factoid is he is playing in training camp with a hoodie under his jersey, and I just love players that do that. And I believe that's what Keenan Allen has been doing his entire career in training camp. So maybe he's assumed the role. Who knows? But just on real talk, I mean, I feel like he is a good player in a third year. I mean, it used to be back in fantasy, 10, 15 years ago now, that the third year breakout was like a real thing. And ever since, in the last like 7, whatever years or so, it's turned into we need success immediately. Whereas back in the day, we gave, folks a little bit more time to turn into something. I remember specifically, like I drafted Sidney Rice one year on the third year breakout year, and he did hit it with Favre. And then of course, Nico Collins last year was a third year breakout. So like, I feel like there's still, I think we maybe write some of these guys off a little too early. And Palmer going into his third year, better situation, is already a quality player, but maybe not a quality fantasy starter. He could take the leap. I mean, it's definitely not outside the realm of possibility.
I will throw out a stat just because it makes me look good. When him and Herbert played without Mike Williams last year, his pace was 1,200 yards.
Interesting.
So,
I mean,
there you go.
obviously, we'd be very happy with that.
Yeah.
So, the offense should be interesting. I mean, I feel like the Chargers should be one of the most interesting teams to watch this year, just in terms of like, what are they going to look like, and is it going to be as run heavy as I'm thinking it's going to be? Because a Greg Roman offense is always running the ball, so it should be very interesting for the overall roster, just to see how it all plays out. So, next guy on the list, James, Bucks fans, we can't stop hearing about this guy. Jalen McMillan
Go Bucks.
is literally just the star of Bucks training camp so far. We'll have to see if it translates into preseason success. I guess as soon as this week, and he seems to be getting all the hype. I can't remember a Bucks receiver getting this level of hype in a long time.
No, it's great.
Jalen McMillan probably since Godwin. All the talent.
Trey Palmer has none of the talent. That's not what I'm saying. That's not what I like. Trey Palmer.
McMillan is better than Trey Palmer.
Yes,
but that's okay. But he also was drafted higher. I think McMillan was regarded higher, maybe even coming into the year, but then he got hurt, so gave Polk some more opportunities at Washington. Obviously, part of that great trio there.
He outperformed Roma Dunze at one point in his career.
Yeah, I have seen that, which is crazy. It's funny, the more we look at it now, like this team needs a player like McMillan. Hopkins is old and injured. Sutton was just kind of meh. You didn't like AJ Brown. Not good enough for you. So like,
not good enough.
You need like an infusion of talent, and I think McMillan. I think it's very on the board that he could be a starter opposite Evans next year if Godwin doesn't come back. Even if not, I think again we know teams run three wide. McMillan is going to be the third receiver at some point this year, if not by week one, because Trey Palmer he's more of a wide receiver 4 in my eyes.
What kind of upside if one of the other two guys is out for some time? Like, what does that look like for you guys as the Bucks fans here?
I mean, I think I think the nature of the Bucks offense is it's not like the Bucks are littered with talent at tight end like Kate Otten is just kind of there, and I think that McMillan would slide pretty nicely into Chris Godwin's role. I think he could easily, play at like a 800 to 1,000 yard pace.
So, like, if Evans or Godwin are out, would you consider him a flex?
Yeah, for sure.
I think that's fair.
Absolutely.
I mean, I don't want to like crown him rookie of the year or anything right now.
No.
I mean, it's obviously we haven't seen anything.
Yeah, we're projecting.
I mean, like the Bucks will be in a lot of 3 wide this year, more than
I think
probably they were in years past. So, I mean, I think he's going to play a lot, and then I think they're also going to be creative with ways they get him the ball kind of early on in his career while the other two are still there and playing well. So, I mean, I just feel like it's a good player. The Bucks seem to love him, and he's performing well. So it's hard to say anything bad right now.
Are the early returns, like, obviously they haven't done anything yet, but like the new OC, has that been good? Like,
I think it has. I mean,
interesting.
Scott Reynolds seems to love him. I mean, he's raving about his offense, how it's more complex than Canales' was last year. There was a little bit more in terms of running styles as opposed to just pounding it right up the middle and
that's good.
Being predictable on first down and second down. So it should be a little bit different for sure. And I think it sounds, from what they were saying, it sounds more West Coasty, where it'll utilize a lot of the middle of the field mesh concepts and stuff like that, which bodes very well for McMillan because he does have probably, outside of Palmer, the most speed on this team at the receiver position. So I feel like it's a great fit. I mean, I'm really looking forward to see how he plays in preseason because I feel like if he pops pretty early, it's going to be really hard to keep him off the field. So. Anywho, Jamari Thrash got cut, so we're not going to talk about him. Moving on to tight ends. This is not the best room, James. Definitely
James
not.
Probably loves it.
I was going to say, James, how many players on this do you want to have on your team right now?
Not Tyler Conklin.
I was going to say Tyler Conklin. I put him at the bottom of the list just for you, James.
Here we are at debate night.
Yeah.
Back to Tyler.
I mean, the other ones are fine. Dallas Goedert, like, what does he get? Like tight end 10 every year or something? He's
Yeah, it's hard to get really excited about Dallas Goedert, man. I guess
he's you know
never
he
scored
has
more than 5 touchdowns in a season.
yeah,
So,
it's not
that's
it's not
insane,
great.
actually.
So he's a classic
good.
player. Like
He's
you're constantly looking to replace him, but until you can find somebody better, like you kind of just have to start him because Hunter Henry is not reliable enough. Yeah,
I am curious to see him in Kellen Moore's offense because he typically features tight end a little bit. So that'll be interesting to see.
And the Eagles still don't really have like a wide receiver 3 who's like commanding a lot of targets or attention or anything. So Dallas Goedert kind of fits that. So
it's starting to sound like it's going to be Johnny Wilson, and they're going to like move one of the other 2 guys to
big
the
old Johnny Wilson.
Johnny Wilson,
dude, is there a better name in the league for a big oaf than Johnny Wilson? Oh, it's great, dude. I love it. Just Kelvin Benjamin reincarnated. Big old boy. Just love it.
Bigger than, well, maybe not
taller for sure.
Taller, not skinnier.
No, it's tough to be bigger than Kelvin.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, just looking at the tight end room here, obviously Goddard seems to be the clear number one. And like you said, James, I mean, he's finished last 5 years 15, 10, 10, 21, 10, and then his rookie year is 21. So it's a lot of just high-end wide receiver 2, low 1-ish. Never had a season over 830 yards, and literally
for a tight end. Hey, man.
I mean, yeah, don't get me wrong, that's fine, but like the touchdown numbers are really where it's killing him. It's
for sure.
His rookie season was 4, moving on 5, 3, 4, 3, 3. So just not any sort of high end production at the touchdowns. So I mean, maybe that changes, and that if he can get to 6, 7 or whatever, obviously this looks way better. So but it's a deep year at tight end. I feel like way more deeper than in recent years. I mean,
he's not a player you're taking in a redraft league to start.
No, I mean, I was kind of looking through that ADP list for tight ends this year in redraft, and it just feels like we can get all the way into tight end 11, 12 and still find something to be excited about. Whereas, Goddard, I'm just not really excited about at this point. So that being said, he's, serviceable and should be fine as a, kind of just a low end tight end. But, obviously there's a Hunter Henry kind of towards the end of his lifetime here, probably in the NFL. And Higbee is hurt to start the year. Probably not going to be much of a threat here early on in the year, but Tyler Conklin, I mean, we can't not talk about him. Sean, obviously you're projecting, I would say significantly bigger things than probably both of us. So where was he at in your? I want to hear where you have him again.
Yards, 10 touchdowns, not a problem.
Yeah.
Oh wow. Okay.
Yeah. I have
Tyler Conklin or Jordan Addison.
Not.
It's not that far off. Maybe.
I'll take the guy that isn't a dumbass.
The guy's not suspended 3 games. Yeah.
But no, it's really funny. Is like not counting Higbee, like the other 3 guys are like back to back in my rankings.
Just right there.
Just right mid tight end 2s. Like, all 3 of them. So not.
Yeah.
No one here is overly exciting. I would love to see if Conklin can score a touchdown this year. That would be great because he didn't score a single touchdown last year. But they didn't.
Is he the Bobby Tonyan of this year? The Robert Tonyan?
I just think like that team is gonna score so many more touchdowns this year just because like
they have an actual quarterback, like somebody that can actually throw the ball.
Yeah,
so like I can't imagine like how many touchdowns can the top 2 guys score. I think there's still room for other guys to score touchdowns on the team. So that's kind of where like the why not take a chance on this guy kind of comes in.
Yeah, I mean, as a depth tight end, he's totally fine, and there's some upside there.
Because we're competing with like Mike Williams off of an ACL and
Malachi Corley who can't run a route and stuff like that. Yeah, not ideal. So at the special teams and defense positions, we got Jason Sanders, the Houston Texans, Detroit Lions, and Green Bay Packers. All 3 of those defenses on the come up in the last few years for sure. So good flexy type options where you can mix and match based on matchups. And then of course, Jason Sanders. I feel like, and I didn't have Sanders on any of my teams last year. Where did he finish? He was number 11, so kicker 11. But I just remember I had him the year he was number 1, and I haven't heard from him since, basically. So like it's so strange. I think he was kicker 22 after that, 16 and 11. So we're trending back upwards again. So
I mean,
you
I
never
would
know.
love
They
to
just
have
score so
the-
many touchdowns.
I would love to
Yeah.
have the quarterback stack, but like I actually would have to like trade something for Justin Tucker. So
Yeah,
I wanna-
seriously. He's an asset that you actually have to move, and I don't think Vince is trading him. So
Nope.
anywho, let's go finish this up with the projected starters. So we had a lot of chalk here, probably at the top, obviously with the quarterback, running back, receivers, and even tight end for that matter. But then it gets kind of interesting, I guess, towards the flex roles. I put Kamara, Javante, and Cortland Sutton in there. And James, I know we said don't start two Broncos. But
Yeah.
we're, maybe that.
wrong shoulder.
So who? So yeah, you're the Shrek, Mr. Shrek.
What do we think about that?
Yeah, no, I don't think he likes that. I don't think he likes that
No.
at all.
So who would Shrek put in instead then?
I mean, it would have to depend on the matchups, but yeah, we're probably looking at like either Singletary or
Josh
Palmer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, probably Singletary.
I feel like
Yeah.
Singletary is a good safe bet for 7 points on any given week, right? Like it's just solid.
Yeah, the flexes are going to be really fluid this year, for
Yeah.
sure. So
All right, so that leads me to our standard last question for all these team reviews. James, obviously the Dynabook lines are out. Has anything
Yeah.
changed for you on the Dynabook lines? From the time you posted them
Well-
till now, where do you see this team?
No, I still think this team, deserves kind of the pole position of number 2. I think, the high end core of Lamar, Tyreek, Amon-Ra, Kyron is that's what it is. It's a high end
Yeah,
core, and
Very studly.
we check a lot of boxes there. And there's enough other vet talents. This most striking thing, though, kind of going through this with, the most recent news of Hopkins being injured, just obviously there's great quality, but there's not the quantity of receivers. Again, we all have to make choices of like which, that's kind of the interesting thing of how we all build our team. We all have to make choices of where we want to maybe have a backup or two less. It's not a huge problem because this team knows which receivers it's starting, but I think it's interesting now that we have a Hopkins injury and like I said, Cortland Sutton had some injuries last year or whatever, like, and we not that Jamari thrashes anything, but like he's
not on the team.
Whatever, he's on the team. So like your backup receivers now are just random shitheads out in free agency or whatever, or cuts that may happen. So I don't know, just something to keep an eye on. That's all.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of thought the same thing, especially after we went through this team reviews. I just feel like maybe the depth isn't quite as deep as I maybe originally thought.
Yeah.
And of course, like with the Hopkins injury, that kind of that wide receiver 4, that top guy off the bench in the flex spot isn't there as of right now, and who knows if that lingers or not. But that, like you said, the starting roster is a very good one. Obviously, the top end talent is there. And I think, on any given week, those top 4 guys that you mentioned, Lamar, Kyron, Tyreek, and Amon-Ra, I mean, those should keep you in most games and at least give you a shot to win most weeks. And then, of course, if, London can take that next step and all those guys stay healthy, we're looking at another playoff run and a deep playoff run. But, I do think we're also maybe at the end of some of the lifespan of some of these players, with an Alvin Kamara, even Javante potentially, obviously, and there's a more down the line probably for him too, but the early returns for Javante have not been great, and we have to turn it around there. But
the injury, and it's just a weird spot with like a team that's projected to not be good, and when you're the running back of a team that's not good, it's just the bottom can fall out at any time. That's the problem with a player like that.
Of course, I mean, if I'm the Broncos and I'm truly not feeling Javante Williams, like how are they not calling a team like the Cowboys or the Cowboys?
Yeah. Oh my God.
And just be like, we'll just throw you a late pick and
Just make it
and then they
happen.
get something with some upside as opposed to wash Zeke or whatever. So I mean, I just feel like Javante could be a guy in the next off season as things play out, like ends up maybe getting another shot somewhere else.
For sure.
So I don't want to write him off, but I just feel like a lot of these guys might be kind of towards the end as opposed towards the beginning. So that's why I actually didn't like totally hate the London move, but it is a true projection. I think for this year, I think you were locked and loaded as another, title defense team for me before the London trade. I still don't hate the trade by any means, but I feel like, from a title defense standpoint, it might weaken the team a little bit this year. So that's kind of just where I view the team. I still think this is, a top 4 team in the league easily. And, just starting wise, there's lots of talent here. So if any of y'all out there watching have other thoughts on both this team and the Armadillos, please sound off in the Discord. Let me know what you have to think. We only have one more team review left. It's the Cheese Fries. We'll be doing that very soon here. And then I think we're going to do a preseason poll episode. I'll actually probably get that poll out soon so that we can get that before the preseason games start. So maybe this week you'll see a poll go out. So please fill that out as soon as you have some availability. And we'll create a whole podcast off of that to kind of see who you think breakout players are, bust players are, more general league questions, and then maybe some team-specific questions for teams around the league. So also, too, if you have any ideas on podcasts, please let us know, and we'll see what we can do. We're also trying to kind of develop a format for the in-season podcasts. I know we mentioned that in the chat earlier. I think it was last week. About the format. So we're working on that. And if you have any other ideas on that, please let us know. But we'll try to get something kind of set in stone for the start of the season so we can have something to look forward to each week. We're going to try to do an every week show. So with that, any parting thoughts, gentlemen? Thank you so much for hanging around this long, and whoever's watching. I see we have 2 people watching out there. So thanks for sticking around. You guys got anything?
Send us your hot takes. I'm ready for them.
Yeah, hot takes episode. I mean, we get some previews, I feel like, in this episode.
Yeah, got some.
I feel. Please send them in.
Some Jalen Warren spice that I wasn't prepared for, but it's all right.
That one doesn't even I don't even consider that one spicy. That's funny.
I know. I can't wait to see what your spicy one is. Then I'm very excited. All right. Well, that's a good teaser for the next time. So, with that, we'll leave you, and then we will see you next time for the chili cheese fries. So, see y'all later.